In his past life, Kim Jun-sung was an ordinary child, but when he was still very young, his parents died, and he began to look for various ways to earn money to pay off all their debts. As a student, Jun-sung never stopped looking for new ways to make money, and it seemed like he had already tried everything. During his college years, Jun-sung became a professional esports player and started making big money by participating in various gaming tournaments, winning big money for winning, which he easily paid off all his parents' debts. But despite all his fame, Jun-sung doesn't want people around him to know that he is a professional esports player, so he uses the pseudonym Jun-hyuk at tournaments. And in normal life, he tries to disguise himself in every possible way. One school day, Jun-sung was approached by a classmate who was surprised at how Jun-sung was able to master such a difficult curriculum so easily. At one point, she notices a new headband on Jun-sung's head, and she asks him if she can try it on, but Jun-sung is against it. The classmate became very upset, and Jun-sung began to apologize and said that he had a good reason for not taking off the headband. Before Jun-sung could finish speaking, another classmate took off his headband without his permission. After removing the headband, the girls noticed that Jun-sung looked very much like the esportsman Jun-hyuk. The rest of his classmates said that their quiet and inconspicuous classmate Jun-sung could not possibly be a professional esports player. But there were also those who found some similarities. Then one of his classmates suggests that Jun-sung wear her glasses, which were similar to the ones Jun-hyuk wears, and at that moment, Jun-sung realized that he had screwed up big time. When Jun-sung put on his glasses, all his classmates realized that their quiet classmate was that same Jun-hyuk. Throughout the day, they surrounded Jun-sung with attention, begging him to play with them or telling him that they were his fans who watched all the tournaments he played in. Towards the end of the school day, Jun-sung went up to the roof of the school, where he could finally be alone with his thoughts. The main reason why Jun-sung hid his involvement in professional esports was to make quick money and the attention that would bring him a lot of different inconveniences in his life. At that moment, the same classmate who wanted to look at his headband came to Jun-sung's roof to apologize for what happened, since she didn't know that everything would happen like this. Jun-sung said that everything that happened was not her fault and that she had nothing to apologize for. That same day, Jun-sung was hit by a truck on his way home, and Jun-sung didn't think that his difficult life would end so easily. At the moment of collision, Jun-sung only wished that in his next life, he would be rich and live without any problems. Then Jun-sung was reborn in another world in the body of a newborn child, whom his mother named with a new name, L. At the age of 4, L learned from books that this world had roughly the same feudal system as the Middle Ages. Ella's new mother was a third-class mage in this world who lost her husband very early. And besides Ella, she had no other relatives or close people. L also wanted to master various magical skills to please his mother, and since childhood, he trained hard every day. One evening, Ella's mother, tired but happy, returns home and calls him Ellie. Elle had repeatedly asked his mother not to call him that, otherwise he would stop talking to her. Ella's mother was very upset by what she heard, calling him heartless for yelling at her like that. Elle began to try to apologize to his mother and said that she could call him Ellie if only she would stop crying. Mom Ella immediately calmed down and began to hug her son, calling him sweet and kind, thereby showing him all her motherly love. The next day, Ella's mother was going to go to the neighboring village to sell Riseto's tea leaves. Ella's mother decided to warn her son that she was going to the next village, but there was no answer, and she thinks that Ella is still sleeping. When Mom entered the room, she saw Elle getting ready to leave, and he said that he wanted to go with her this time. At first, the mother is touched by the fact that her beloved son wanted to take the initiative and go on a journey with her. However, she immediately says that she is categorically against this, because on the way they might run into some monsters that would want to eat Ella. At that time, Elle had not yet told his mother that he could use magic. Ella also couldn't shake the thought that he needed to master new spells as quickly as possible, because if he became a 5th-class mage, he would be treated like a viscount. If Elle becomes a 7th-class mage, he will become a powerful and rich mage who can live the rest of his life without worrying about anything. Elle told his mother that they would be okay, and that if there was any danger, he would definitely protect her from danger. Ella's mother couldn't resist such cuteness, and she still decides to take Ella with her on the journey. Elle promises his mother that he will do whatever she tells him and that he will not do anything dangerous. Before leaving, Ella's mother tells him that no matter what happens, she will definitely protect him. Mom started to worry that she and Elle had been walking for several hours without a break, to which Elle replied that he wasn't tired because he had been training a lot before. Elle also added that future great magicians need to work on themselves from childhood in order to have a healthy body and an unshakable spirit. Then the mother remembers that during her studies at the Academy of Magicians, she was often told such wisdom. El distracts his mother from her thoughts and shows her a flower he read about in a book and said that if necessary, they could use it as a medicine, which once again convinced his mother that El was very smart. A little later, they reached a place where Mom had set up a small resting place during one of her hikes. At one point, El noticed strange sounds coming from the bushes. Meanwhile, a small group of orcs was advancing towards them when they caught the scent of humans. Mom immediately covered Ella with her body so that he would not be harmed in any way at the hands of the orcs. The orcs were very hungry, and they immediately prepared for battle, hoping that they would win and be able to feast on human flesh. El shouts to his mother that these orcs look a lot like green pigs, because he read somewhere that if you call an orc a green pig, it will immediately calm down. However, contrary to all of Ella's expectations, the orcs became even more angry, and they immediately decided to attack them. Mama Ella did not lose her composure and immediately prepared her spell to summon a fireball, with which she wanted to neutralize the orcs. After using fireball, the orcs were hit by a bright burning flame, which immediately incapacitated them. Ella's mother just chuckled at El calling these orcs green orcs. After such an attack, the orcs could do nothing but flee, fearing that they might be attacked again. El was incredibly surprised that his mother was able to defeat such a group of orcs so easily. El told his mother that she was very good at such powerful magic, which made her very happy. During lunch, Mom explained to Elu that orcs are very afraid of fire, but at the same time, even more dangerous monsters can live in this forest. Mom also explained that monsters like trolls and ogres are very difficult to defeat due to their amazing ability to regenerate and very resilient constitution. El thought that if they could defeat even one of these monsters, they could make a lot of money, since troll blood is often used in alchemy, and ogre skin is very hard to get. Mom tells El that their journey to Banzark village will take about 3 days, and El says that he can endure such a long journey. After 3 days of continuous travel, El and her mother finally reached the village of Banzark. El looked at Banzark and could not stop being amazed at the beauty he saw. Once in Banzark itself, Ella could not shake the thought that for the first time in his life, he felt as if he was in another world. After El and her mother got to Banzark, they headed to one of the local shops. Once inside, they were greeted by Mr. Diebel, the owner of the store. The first thing Mr. Diebel noticed was that this time Ella's mother did not come alone. Here, Mama introduced Ella to Mr. Diebel, calling him her most reliable friend and also calling him a smart and sweet boy. Then the Mr. greeted Ella and noticed his unusual eye color, which was not at all like the eye color of his peers. Mr. Diebel apologized to Ella's mother and said that she really did have an amazing son. After this, Mama Ella showed Mr. Diebel some Rossetto tea leaves of excellent quality and variety. Mr. Diebel assessed the tea leaves and said that he was willing to pay an extra 5 gold for them, since people usually couldn't get such high-quality goods. El noticed how well Mr. Diebel dealt with people and how honestly he priced goods, and he thought that if he had to do business with any store in the future, it would definitely be Mr. Diebel's store. After this, El and Mom did not linger in the store, and they decided to leave the store. After their visit, Mr. Diebel sat down at his desk and kept thinking that El would definitely become a great man in the future. After that, El and her mother went to the magic tower to sell mana stones with runes there. Mana stones allowed anyone to use magic easily, but because each stone could only be used once, they were very expensive. El thought that with his technique he could create rune stones without any problem. But since the materials to create them were very expensive, he simply couldn't risk creating them. Then he asks his mother if he can buy the necessary grimoires from the magic tower. Also in the magic tower, one could purchase magic books of the 9th and 10th class, which would help to achieve the corresponding class of magic. At the moment, the best mage on the continent was able to reach the 9th level of magic, but until now, no one could surpass him in terms of mastery of magic. Ella was amazed by the fact that among all the classes, there was also a 10th class of magic, which caused his plans for mastering magic to change a little. Elle immediately asks her mother to buy him the 8th and 9th grade grimoires, and such an aspiration made her very happy. Once they arrived at the magic tower, they were greeted by the vice master of the magic academy. Mama Ella showed the vice master her mana stones, which seemed very good to him. The vice master wanted to know who this boy was and began to squeeze Elle's face, which Elle himself did not like very much. After this, the vice master introduced Ella's mother to his son Gedrick, who possessed first-class magic. Then the vice master told his son to show the guests how he could summon an energy ball. Then, with great effort, the boy was finally able to summon a small energy ball. Mama Ella was surprised by the vice master's son's skills, and she couldn't wait to find out how powerful a magician he could become. The vice master grabbed Elle's mother by the hands and promised her that if she was with him, Elle would be as skilled in magic as Gedrick. Elu didn't like the way some guy was pestering his mom, so he tells everyone that he can create an energy ball too. Everyone was shocked by what they heard, and his mother asked Ella why he was telling everyone such things. Then Elle concentrated all his magical power and began to create a huge energy ball. Elle created a giant energy ball that was tens of times larger than Gedrick's energy ball. Mom Ella looked at her son's energy ball and was surprised at how much powerful magical power it contained. After summoning the energy ball, Ella's mother immediately threw herself into her son's arms and did not stop praising him, calling him the best magician in the world. After this, the master burst into the room, wanting to find out who was able to demonstrate such magic. The master began to search for the person who created such a large energy ball, hoping to find a 7th-class magician. After that, he saw Ella in front of him and said that he had never seen such an unusual rogue, since, according to the master, Ella's eyes did not correspond to his real age. Elle did not fully understand the master's words, and he explained that such sages as the master can know everything about a person, and for this he only needs to look into his eyes. A couple of minutes later, Elle and the master moved to the library of the magic tower, where the master wanted to talk to Elle alone. The master told Elle that his magic was at the 1st level, but his mana was enormous, and he was surprised at how in such a short time Elle was able to develop his mana so much. The master also told Elle that in terms of combat skills, a 7th-level mage is comparable to a sword master, but due to the limited mana on the battlefield, mages have a higher chance of dying in battle than experienced knights, and he wanted to know from Elle how he managed to increase his mana so much. Elle immediately realized that the master was trying to learn such a powerful magical technique from him just like that. The master was very surprised by such youthful audacity, and he promised to provide Elu with an appropriate amount for such information. The master offered Elle 10,000 gold coins, with which even his grandchildren would be able to live in luxury and not deny themselves anything. But Elle refused such a price and said that he needed mana stones and grimoires of the 8th and 9th class. The master didn't understand why he needed all this, but if he needed them so badly, he prepared 100 mana stones and several grimoires. Elle thanked the master for such a profitable deal for both of them. The master did not understand why, when communicating with Elle, he had the impression that he was talking to a great magician. Before leaving the library, Elle asked the master not to tell anyone what Elle had given him. When Elle and his mother returned home, his mother began to question him about how he was able to use such magic in such a short time. In his past life, Elle spent all his free time studying because he wanted not only to study in college, but also to live well in the future. Of all the school subjects, he liked mathematics the most, and he got incredible pleasure after solving any difficult problem. Once in this world, Elle noticed that the magic formulas here were a little more complicated than mathematical ones, and it was precisely because he remembered these mathematical formulas from his past life that he was able to reduce the time it took to use magic to a noticeable minimum. Of course, Elle couldn't teach his mother mathematical formulas, so he decided to provide her with ready-made magic formulas with which his mother could use her spells with the same power in much less time. Mom Ella couldn't help but be happy that she had such a smart son, and she asked to teach him some other different techniques. After 2 years, Elle and his mother moved closer to the Banzark magic tower, and his mother was able to become a 4th-level mage. One day, during one of their trips to Banzark, Elle and his mother came across slave traders who were holding 2 emaciated girls. Elle and her mother could not allow this to happen, and they decided to punish this group of slave traders. Mama Ella was a very conscientious woman, and she could not allow such behavior. Mama Ella decided that it was simply useless to have any dialogue with such people, and she decided to use her magic against them. Elle decides to help her mother, and also uses her magic against the villains, as a result of which all the slave traders fled, leaving the girls alone. After such an attack, Elle and her mother removed all the shackles from the exhausted girls and said that they were now safe. Ella's mother learned from the girls that they wanted to find their families, but when they said they had nowhere to return to, she allowed them to live with her and Ella. Many years passed. Elu was already 12 years old, and he, his mother, and these girls lived together in peace and harmony. One such day, Serena, one of those girls, decided to wake up Ella using the wind magic she had mastered. Ella woke up and was surprised at how Serena was able to improve her magical skills in such a short time. Serena said that at first it was hard to master any magic, but each time she found it more and more fun and interesting to learn new spells, and over time, learning magic ceased to be some kind of tedious activity for her. When Elle went down to the first floor, he noticed that Kana, the second girl, was not home. Serena said that Kana has been going outside more and more lately to practice her sword skills. At that moment, Kana returned back to the house and greeted Ella and Serena. Elle greeted Kana and praised her, telling her that her skills were getting better every day. Kana said that every time she swings her sword, she feels like she's getting stronger each time. At first, Kana wanted to show off her skills to Ella and Serena, to which Ella politely said that he would be happy to evaluate her fighting skills when they went outside. Kana and Elle were about the same age, while Serena was 2 years older than them, and it seems that they were previously isolated from the rest of the world and that they had a very difficult life before. But despite their past, the girls very quickly settled into their new home and new family, and from that moment on, Elle taught them. Serena had a talent for magic spells and easily became a first-level mage. Meanwhile, Kana had an excellent physique and was good at wielding a sword. Elle was very happy for the girls, and he was calm that they were able to find a new home and a new family. A couple of minutes later, their mother came to them, simply beaming with joy, and Elle decided to ask her what was so good that had happened. Mom said that yesterday she officially became a 5th grade master. Everyone was very happy for her, and everyone started congratulating her on such a great achievement. Elle suggested that everyone celebrate such an event, but at first no one understood Elle's idea. Then Elle suggested that they all visit the magic tower, and everyone approved of the idea. When they were all inside the tower, the master saw Ella and was surprised at how much he had grown since their last meeting. Elle was also happy to see the master and congratulated him on his recent victory in the battle against the sword master, telling him that the master was getting stronger. The master said that this was all only thanks to the technique that Elle once revealed to him. After that, everyone sat down at the table to find out why Elle wanted to visit the magic tower. Then Elle took his bag out from his bosom and poured a handful of magic stones onto the table. The craftsman was surprised at how Elle was able to create such an item, as it was one of the most difficult items to obtain that Elle was able to make on his own. Such magic stones were much more valuable than mana stones, which could only be used once every few years, while magic stones could be used up to 10 times, and their recovery time took only 3 days. It was because of these stones that mages from other magic towers across the continent had been tracking Ella's house. But nothing strange had happened during all this time. So Elle assumed that such stones could be of great interest to the master, and he realized that Elle wanted to get something in return. Elle said that he only needed 4 things for the Banzark Magic Tower to be able to obtain the rights to use the magic stone creation technique for their further production. And the first of these things was a request to provide his family with protection. Ella's second request was for some books on witchcraft and swordsmanship so the girls could further develop their skills. Ella's third request was to rent a nice hotel for his mother, who had recently become a 5th-level mage, and he wanted to organize a luxurious vacation for her to celebrate. Mom Ella couldn't contain her emotions and started hugging her son tightly for trying so hard to do for her. Ella's last request was for books on how to create golems. The master was surprised by Elle's last request, since even with all the necessary instructions, Elle would not be able to create a golem. In response, Elle said that he was simply interested in learning how golems could be created, but it was through golems that Elle intended to achieve his goal. 4 years passed. The life of Ella and his family was prosperous and they lived in abundance. One night, a couple of bandits were going to capture the creator of magic stones and bring him to their boss. The bandits were ordered to break into the house, find the creator of the magic stones, and bring him back safe and sound, which initially seemed like a very difficult task to them. Then one of the bandits suggested that they simply take and get rid of the creator of the magic stones if he showed any resistance, despite the fact that they were ordered to bring him alive. Then Elle immediately appeared in front of the bandits, which scared them a lot, and he said that this was a very good idea. After this, a small group of large combat golems created by Elle appeared behind the bandits. One of the golems immediately grabbed one of the bandits to neutralize him. The captured bandit tried to free himself from the golem's grasp, but when he tried to strike him with his swords, the swords immediately split into several pieces. The bandits had no chance against such formidable opponents. After a couple of blows, the golems grabbed both bandits, who lost consciousness, and dragged them in an unknown direction. Elle thought that even though these golems were unfinished, they showed their abilities very well during the battle. After Elle received books on how to create golems from the master of the magic tower, he began to spend a lot of time creating them, and simply immersed himself in the process. However, despite such good efficiency, they were still not suitable for the purpose that Elle wanted to achieve. After this, Elle decides to clean up the traces of the bandits' blood that the golems left behind so that her mother and the girls do not see these traces. The next morning, Serena woke up early as usual and had already started preparing breakfast for everyone. Elle greeted Serena and acted as if nothing strange had happened yesterday. A little later, Kana also came home and was practicing her fighting skills again. Kana offered to show Elle her new fighting techniques that she had learned on the street during training. But Elle said that he would definitely watch her techniques later. Elle was glad that everything was going as usual today, after which he decided to ask the girls where their mother was now. Meanwhile, their mother was training to use her magical skills, but this time she encountered some difficulties. This time, her magic suddenly went out of control, and she was afraid that just a little more, and her magic would become completely uncontrollable. After that, her magical fireball disappeared, causing her to fall to her knees from fatigue. At this point, Elle and the girls found their mother and asked her to come home, have breakfast, and at least take a little break from training. Elle told his mother that she shouldn't overexert herself during training, since she was already very good at magic. Mom didn't believe Ella's words and said that it was all a lie and that she should become a 6th level mage. Elle noticed that his mother was acting extremely strange, and he did not understand what had happened to his mother. Then Elle remembered that in his past life he had used a secret technique to increase his concentration. Then he decides to teach the mother and girls the technique of belly breathing, in which a person inhales through the nose and exhales through the mouth, due to which all the pressure is redirected to one point and increases strength. Everyone concentrated on performing this technique and began to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. After this technique, Serena found it more difficult to breathe because she performed the technique too quickly. Kana's stomach muscles began to cramp because she was trying too hard to breathe. Elle said he usually didn't pay attention to his breathing technique, as even he found the technique a bit difficult to perform. Meanwhile, Mom started to succeed in performing this technique, and Elle noticed how a lot of mana began to thicken around Mom. Mom was only thinking about how Elle was able to learn such a technique on his own without anyone's help, and at the same time teach such a technique to her and the girls, and that she must become stronger so that they all could live happily. Mom kept feeling how her energy continued to grow, and how her body and spirit were becoming stronger. After Mom concentrated, she created a huge fireball that she could control with ease. From the huge fireball, Mom was able to create a beautiful fire horse, which greatly surprised Ed and the girls. The boys immediately began to congratulate their mother on how easily she was able to perform such a technique, and they also continued to feel all the magical power emanating from her. Mom began to thank Ella for teaching her such a technique, because now she will definitely be able to become a 6th level magician. Ella was glad that his mother had a smile on her face again and that she was doing well again. A little later, everyone returned home to discuss over lunch how Mom was one step closer to a new class. But despite this, Mom was worried that lately Elle had increasingly begun to isolate himself in the workshop, which is why they began to communicate with each other less and less. At this point, Elle returned to the workshop right after lunch, where he was thinking about how difficult it was to create the strongest golem on the continent. Elle still planned to create an artificial monster that could have independent thinking. One of the most difficult stages in creating such a golem was mastering very complex mental magic, which is only available to 8th grade mages. The only way for Ella to survive in his class was to use dark magic, in which he had to combine all of his most sinister thoughts and emotions. But despite the fact that Elle understood all this very well in theory, in practice Elle was too low class. Also, such magic would not give him any effect, since the entire effect is only available to 7th level mages. Due to these complications, Elle was unable to put his original plan into action, and he first needed to reach the 7th grade. Suddenly, Serena entered the workshop to remind him about the beginning of magical training. Elle remembered that Serena was having trouble mastering some of the basics. Serena said that she didn't fully understand the nature and essence of mana, but Elle didn't quite understand what Serena meant. At first, Serena tried to explain to Elu that he could feel a magical response when mana filled his body. Serena also said that most likely it all depends on the type of mana, since each time she feels several types of mana at once, which gather in her into a single clot. Here, Elle thought about the fact that mana can actually differ in different types and characteristics. Serena said that these were just her guesses, and that most likely her words should not be taken seriously. Then Elle went to his desk to test Serena's hypothesis about the differences in the types and characteristics of mana. Elle took out several mana stones from the desk drawer and felt that each stone emitted its own special mana. Elle felt how the mana of each stone was different from the mana of other stones, and how these different types of mana mixed together to form a powerful magical cluster. Ella was amazed that he had not noticed such an important and useful magical feature before, and he decides to learn a little more about this feature in practice. Elle concentrated several types of mana within himself at once in order to sense this entire magical accumulation. After this, Elle found himself in a space unknown to him, in which he could visually see the differences between types of mana in the form of millions of bright stars in the sky. El remembered how in the game he played in his past life, the composition of a unit could give a great advantage in the later game, and he guessed that various combinations could greatly enhance his magical abilities. After this, El decides to try to combine all the types of mana that came from the mana stones. El was going to create a completely new magical power that Serena told him about. At first, Ella found it extremely difficult to contain and try to control such an outgoing force, even with the use of her special breathing technique. But despite all these difficulties, El was counting on the fact that if he succeeded, it would be much easier to get into the 7th grade. After combining so many types of mana, El mentally found himself in a kind of sanctuary in which even more types of mana created even more stars. In this sanctuary, El saw a bright silhouette of a bird, the light from which was many times brighter than from any star in this space, and El followed this bird. When El woke up, Serena was in front of him, and she started to worry about him and tried to wake El up. Serena told Elu that a powerful vortex appeared around him, causing him to lose consciousness and fall to the floor. By this time, Serena was starting to get worried as El stopped responding to her excited cries. When El fully regained consciousness, he noticed that his class had improved. El was very grateful to Serena for telling him that there could be multiple types of mana in this world. Serena just looked at Ella and thought about how amazing he was and how much effort he put into becoming stronger. Then Serena decides to ask Ella what kind of magic class he got. Serena also noticed that Ella's magical aura was much larger and stronger than her mother's, to which Ella asked Serena to keep it all a secret. Meanwhile, El thought that it was time for him to move on to the next stage of creating the most powerful golem. At that moment, Mom was sitting on the hill and looking at the house, thinking that it was a beautiful place. Mom also looked at the portrait of Rayon, her husband and Ella's father, and said that she would do everything in her power to protect their sleep from any danger. It was Ella's 17th birthday and he was cooking breakfast for everyone that day. El decided to make porridge as the first dish for everyone, which everyone really liked. However, despite such a delicious breakfast, Mom said that she herself would like to make breakfast for everyone on his birthday. But El responded to his mother's words by saying that he enjoyed cooking for everyone because he loved to cook. The next dish that El wanted to treat his family to was kimchi fried rice. At first, Ella had some difficulties with cooking, since getting rice cereal, cabbage, and all the necessary spices in this world turned out to be somewhat more difficult than in the previous world. On top of everything else, El also used magic to make kimchi in such conditions. Everyone was delighted with the appetizing appearance of the dish, which made Ella very happy. At first, everyone thought the dish was a bit spicy, but despite this, everyone really liked the dish. After everyone had eaten their portions, everyone started asking Ella for more, which made him very happy that everyone liked his dish so much. A few minutes later, El was washing the dishes and couldn't stop thinking about how much everyone enjoyed his food. At that moment, Elu's mother approached him and asked him to talk to him about a very serious topic. El looked at his mother and saw her extremely serious expression, which he most likely had never seen on his mother's face. A few minutes later, El and her mother were left alone in the room to talk without any unnecessary witnesses. At first, they were silent for a while, and El thought that perhaps this was some difficult topic for his mother. At first, El thought that she didn't like the food he had prepared for everyone today, after which he immediately rejected this option. Suddenly, Mom said that she had been hiding her past and his father's past from him. But now that Elu was 17, she was finally ready to tell him everything. The first thing she said was that she was the daughter of Marquis Einhart of the Bliard Empire, and her real name was Sylphir von Einhart. This news simply shocked Ella, since the Bliard Empire was one of the most powerful empires on the continent. In addition, the Einhart family was one of the most influential families of aristocratic mages, in which only the most talented children in magic were born. There was also a rumor about this family that Marquis Einhart almost succeeded in becoming an 8th-class mage, while his son had the power equal to that of a 7th-class mage master. Ella was also interested in the origin of her mother's pendant, which only 7th-class mages can create. Elle also remembered that their library contains books that are extremely difficult for ordinary people to obtain, and only very rich and influential people can have such books. Mom continued her story and said that her mother died 4 days after she was born, and so she was raised by a very strict father and older brother. When she was 7 years old, her father betrothed her to the prince of the Bliard Empire. However, she did not want this at all, and she wanted to live freely and live the way she wanted. Years later, she met Rayan Luvius, Elle's real father, and she immediately fell in love with him at first sight. Even though he had no special skills, no attractive appearance, no wealth, he was the only one with whom she could calmly dream of freedom. Her father originally planned to marry her to a prince when she turned 17, but before that she ran away from home with Rayon. Even though they were being pursued by her father's guards, she was truly happy with Rayon. But their shared happiness did not last long, and less than a year later they were captured by the guards of the Einhart family so that her father could personally separate them. Her father promised that he would free him, but first he allowed her to say goodbye to Rayon. She started apologizing to Rayon for putting him through all this, but Rayon didn't care at all and just wanted to know if she would stay in the family. She only thanked Rayon for the fact that thanks to him she felt real freedom for the first time, and for the fact that being next to him made her feel happy. After that, she told Rayon to move on and be happy without her, even though it would be hard for her to live without someone like him. Rayon just said that even if they were separated from each other, they would still be together. Immediately after this dialogue, one of the guards killed Rayon by cutting off his head, which left Sylphur in deep shock. Her father said that she should be grateful to him for relieving her of such pain and for allowing her to talk to him one last time before her inevitable execution. Then her father did not forgive her, as when the engagement with the prince was broken off, he simply took and kicked her out. Before she left the family home, her father told her that she could return back to the family once she became a 6th-class mage. That day she was going to end her suffering, but that was when she realized that she was pregnant. At that moment she was the happiest girl in the world, and she wanted to do everything to make her future child happy. She wanted to give Ella everything that she was not given in her childhood, happiness and freedom, and that was the only reason she lived. After Mom told Ella everything, she said that she was going to take back her old last name. Now that she has reached 6th grade, she can finally return back to her family, where she will definitely be accepted. She said that everything there is much better than here, and that there she can give him something more suitable for Elle to continue studying magic, and she invites Elle to return there together. Elle didn't understand why his mother wanted so much to go back to those terrible people who had kicked her out and left her alone in such a difficult moment. The treatment of aristocrats was different in the Bliard Empire, and in the empire they lived in, it was radically different, since families like the Einhart family were in the same social position as the imperial family. Mom said that she wanted Elle to continue his magical training in the more favorable conditions that the Einhart family could provide, and she asked Elle to think about it. Elle said he would definitely think about such a proposal later, but now he had to go. The mother was glad that her son now knew the whole truth, which gave her an incredible spiritual relief. After such a difficult conversation, Elle hugged his mother, which made them both feel much better after such a conversation. When Elle came out of his mother's room, he saw Serena and Kana standing near the door, having overheard their entire conversation. Serena and Kana were worried that because they served Elu and his mother as slaves, the Einhart family would not want to accept both of them. Elle reassured the girls and told them that he could introduce them to the Einhart family as registered mercenaries, and then they could be together as well. The girls immediately calmed down and thanked Ella for such a brilliant idea. After this, Elle told the girls to start packing their things while he had to go to a place that his mother shouldn't know about. Elle was fully aware that there was no way he could dissuade his mother from returning. After some time, Elle decides to visit Mr. Dibble's store, whose business continued to flourish. When Mr. Dibble met Elle, he began to thank Elle for the fact that it was thanks to his rights to produce and sell mana stones that his store attracted even more customers, which led to a good economic growth of his store. Elle wanted to ask Mr. Dibble if he could get any information. Mr. Dibble said that he had his own partnerships with all the information guilds on the continent, and that he could even tell about the secret treasures of the royal family. Then Elle asked Mr. Dibble to tell him everything about the Einhart family of the Bliard Empire. At that moment, Mr. Dibble noticed Ella's extremely serious look, which made the atmosphere much darker. Mr. Dibble began by saying that the Einhart family's history was over 700 years old, and that the family was one of the most prestigious and influential families in the entire history of the Bliard Empire. Also, during the entire existence of the Einhart family, as many as 3 8th-level mages were born into it. The Einhart family was so influential that they could easily turn people against the imperial power. Mr. Dibble also mentioned the infamous event of the broken engagement of the Marquis's daughter to the Crown Prince, after which the Marquis's daughter ran off with another man. However, history said that the Marquis and the Crown Prince showed their mercy and forgave her, and allowed her to live a peaceful life, after which the Marquis beheaded that very man, and many aristocrats praised such an act. It was then that Elle noticed that this story was different from what his mother had told him, and he realized that his mother was being used in this story as a tool to support their lie. Mr. Dibble also added that there are also rumors that say that Marquis was an extremely ruthless and cruel man who would do anything to preserve the reputation of his family, and that it would be better not to get involved with such a person. Then Elle thought that if his mother returned to the family, she could be used. But Elle would not allow anyone to even try to harm his loved ones. Elle thanked Mr. Dibble for the information he provided, and Elle was about to leave the store, but Mr. Dibble told him that no one had come to the Master of the Magic Tower for a long time. Then Elle decides to also visit the Master of the Magic Tower one last time. The Tower Master felt somehow sad to realize that in such a long time, Elle was the first one who wanted to visit him, to which Elle said that he did not come to him empty-handed. Elle took out a folded piece of paper with a detailed plan for upgrading the Golem Knight, and then gave the plan to the Master. The Master was amazed by such a valuable gift that Elle had prepared for him, after which he began to study this plan. Elle said that it was almost impossible for a golem to create its own consciousness, and so the golem had to be controlled by a knight. While the Master was studying the new plan, he felt that Elle was not telling him something about this improvement. Elle said that he was a little tired of all these experiments, and that he would soon be leaving the village, which is why he would most likely not see the Master again. At first, the Master did not believe that Elle would soon leave him forever, but looking at Elle's face, he realized that the matter was extremely serious. Then the Master approached Ella and said that someday everyone would know about Ella and his incredible skills. The Master is also sure that when this happens, he will definitely be talking about it, regardless of where he will be and what he will become famous for. These words touched Ella very much, and he said that in the future, he would definitely visit the Master again. That evening, Elle was in his workshop putting the finishing touches on his plan. Elle then used several mana stones again to create a new type of mana to summon his battle golem. After this spell, his powerful knight golem in golden armor appeared from the portal, which was several times larger than Elle himself. After the summoning, Elle ordered the golem to wake up to check its functioning and performance a little. After the wake-up command, the golem awoke and greeted its creator. Even though the golem had reacted correctly now, Elle thought that his golem still had some flaws, one of which was that the ego wasn't the most suitable for reviving it. After this, Elle told the golem that after some time he had completed one task for Elle, but until that moment he must remain in the spatial pocket from which Elle had summoned the golem. The golem said that he would bide his time, after which he returned to the portal from which he came. Elle had hoped that he wouldn't have to see the full power of his golem, after which he thought it was time to go. Meanwhile, at the Einhard estate, Marquis and his son were playing chess, and the son said that he had completed the investigation into the sale of magic stones, and that he had found the source of these stones. The Marquis was simply happy with this news, since he had been trying for a long time to track down the one who creates these magical stones. And finally, after so many years of searching, he found him. However, the Marquis wanted to know why his son took up this matter only now, when his father had asked him to do it several years ago. The eldest son replied that he had been trying to track down the inventor for all these years, but his golems had created a number of difficulties. He said that all the mercenaries and assassins he sent to do this were mercilessly killed by these golems. The Marquis considered this man to be quite a serious opponent, since he was able to create something that others could not. The eldest son added that all the magic towers on the continent had simply abandoned all attempts to search for magic stones. He also said that the production of such magical stones is quite inexpensive, and therefore such artifacts can bring them a lot of money. The Marquis then calculated that if they could sell such items in one of the 10 stores on the continent, their family store would become the most profitable store. The Marquis's son watched all this from the side and did not understand how a man like his father, who usually did not compliment just anyone, began to admire some stones. The son finally tells his father that this very inventor is Sylphir, or rather her son Elle, who recently turned 17, which greatly surprised the Marquis himself. Then the Marquis ordered that his daughter, whom he had driven out of the family many years ago, be brought to him. The Marquis expected that his daughter would definitely want to return to the family, especially with her son. At the same time, the Marquis never stopped thinking about how his family would prosper when they learned the secret of creating magic stones. The eldest son wanted to know from his father what to do with the crown prince, who would most likely not be happy with the news that Sylphir had returned to the family, to which the Marquis replied that it was better not to tell him about it. The Marquis naively expected that the daughter he had exiled would definitely want to return to the family and help her family. The next day, Elle, her mother, and the girls went to the Einhard family, leaving their old home forever, to which they are unlikely to return. Elle was glad that they were all returning to the Einhard family together without any bad memories. Elle also wanted to tell his mother that he had become a 7th grade SAG, but he didn't know how to explain to her how such a young guy could reach such a high grade, while many cannot reach such a grade in their entire lives. Elu also found it hard to imagine how he would be able to explain his magical powers in the event of some emergency. After some time, Elle, her mother, and the girls were in the village, where they were going to go to Käfermill, the place where the Einhart family lived, using the teleportation service. Mom approached the man who was in charge of the teleport to find out the amount needed for the teleportation. The man says that teleportation will cost 200 gold coins per person, and for 4 people, 800 gold coins. Mom said it was too expensive for them, to which the man grabbed her hand and said that such portals are often used by influential people who have money for it. Kana couldn't stand to see what this man was doing, and she decided to swing her leg at him. A minute later, another man approached them, surprised that this man had created such a trivial problem. He apologized to his mother for the inconvenience his colleague had caused them. After his apologies, he walked up to the man sitting near the portal and told him to get out of his place. The man said that they owed 400 gold coins for the teleportation to Käfermill, and also because there were 4 of them, they were given a discount, and in total they owed 360 gold coins. Mom was very happy that the price was so low, while Elle thought that they almost overpaid for all this by almost 2 times. The man wondered why they were going to Käfermill, to which the mother replied that they were moving there to live. The man said that in such a strong family they all felt very confident, after which everyone turned their gaze to Kana. Within a minute, everyone was standing on the teleportation device, and everyone was ready to move to Käfermill. A moment later, Elle, her mother, and the girls were already in another teleportation device, which was located near Käfermill. After some time, everyone reached the capital, which simply captivated everyone with its beauty. Mom said that the first thing they needed to do was find a place to live temporarily. After that, Mom wanted to register Serena and Kana as mercenaries, and she was sure that they would be perceived as future professionals. Mom also suggested that after registering Serena and Kana, they take a walk around the city to show them the local neighborhoods and attractions. At that moment, Mom heard a familiar voice that said her name, and it turned out to be the Crown Prince, with whom Mom had once broken off her engagement. The Crown Prince did not look or behave in any hostile way towards his mother, but was even somewhat polite and hospitable. Elle looked at the man and recognized the same prince who was his mother's former fiancé. Elle remembered Mr. Dibel's story about how Rayan Luvius was brutally and mercilessly killed by the guards in front of his mother, since it was the Crown Prince who gave the guards the order to execute his father. Meanwhile, the prince continued to compliment Ella's mother. The prince also said that despite some disagreements in the past, he is still glad to see her and know that she is alive and well. After flattering compliments, the prince decided to ask his mother who these children were, to which his mother did not know how to answer him. Kana told Serena that this gentleman was nothing like the nasty man her mother had told her about. Elle looked into the prince's eyes and saw in them all that feigned politeness behind which he tries to hide all his evil intentions. The prince continued to shower his mother with compliments about how she was still as attractive as she had been in those years, and that she was still the most beautiful girl in the world. At the same time, the prince thought to himself that he would still get her at any cost. Elle clearly saw how the prince was trying not to show his true plans and his bad character. Then Elle decides to intervene in the conversation and, with a smiling and unremarkable expression on her face, ask the prince if he knows his mother. Elle introduced himself to the prince as his mother's son, thinking to himself that this prince could not look at his mother with such a nasty and disgusting look. The prince, with the same polite and smiling face, told Elu that he really did look a lot like his mother. After this, the prince said that he was glad of such an unexpected meeting, and suggested that they meet again sometime, to which Elle said that he would look forward to their next meeting. After this conversation, the prince walked past his mother and whispered in her ear that she was still his woman. Elle heard what the prince said to his mother and shouted after him that very soon he would regret what he did to his mother. The prince paid no attention to Ella and simply thought that Sylphir was finally returning to the family. The prince also thought it was a good idea to try to make Sylphir his mistress again, and to do this, he needed to get rid of Ella. Elle notices that something is wrong with his mother and decides to calm her down. Mom said that she just needed to pull herself together, after which she suggested that everyone go to the guild to register the girls as mercenaries. After some time, Mom, Elle, and the girls arrived at the guild and were about to begin the exam. The man explained to them that after the exam, the girls would receive a mercenary rank from F rank to B rank, which depended on how well they dealt with the guildmaster. Later, the head of the guild himself appeared, who was surprised that he would be conducting an exam with girls. Then the guild leader suggests holding an exam against both Serena and Kana at the same time. The guild leader told the girls that he would not hurt them, naively assuming that they would not be able to defeat him. The girls were somewhat surprised by the guild leader's naivety, and together they decided not to spare him during the exam. A couple of minutes later, the girls and the guild leader were in the arena for the exam. The guild leader told the girls to give it their all, and then the girls prepared to attack. Kana took out her sword and prepared to use a fire sword attack to hit the guildmaster as hard as possible. After such an attack, Serena prepared to use the battle spell Wind Sword to knock the last of the strength out of the coach. At first, they began to worry that they had slightly overdone their real capabilities, and that they could seriously injure the guild leader. However, the exhausted guild leader was able to find the strength to come to his senses and inform the girls that they were both receiving B rank. Elle was incredibly happy that the girls were able to obtain the highest rank of mercenary so easily. The girls were also happy about this news, and they wanted to ask their mother if this would be enough for them to protect her. Meanwhile, Mom was a little distracted and was thinking about something of her own with a sad expression on her face. After this, the mother finally turned her attention to the girls and also congratulated them on successfully passing the exam. Elle, of course, noticed that something was wrong with his mother, which is why he also began to worry a lot about her. That same evening, my mother sat in the hotel and kept thinking that the prince had not changed at all over all these years. She was afraid that this prince would make every effort to make her his mistress, after which he would definitely want to do the same thing to Elle that he once did to Rayan. She couldn't allow anyone to harm her son, and she was ready to do anything for him. She just wanted to quietly and peacefully return to her family. But after meeting the prince, she realized that it would now be much more difficult to do so, and she began to think that the Einhart family should side with Ella and protect him. Meanwhile, Elle and the girls had just returned to their mother's room. When Elle entered the room, his mother immediately offered to let the Einhart family know his secret of creating magic stones. Mom also said that the entire continent is currently obsessed with the idea of creating magic stones, and if Elle teaches the Einhart family how to create magic stones on their own, they will definitely accept and protect Elle. Elle told his mother that they shouldn't do that, since he was capable of protecting himself, his mother, and the girls on his own. Serena and Kana said that they too are able to protect each other from any danger. After all that was said, Elle and the girls invited their mother to have a few drinks with them. The girls also brought food along with the drinks, since they had not eaten anything all day. Mom felt a little better and decided to have a snack and a drink with everyone. Elle thought about how in his past life he couldn't help his late parents with their debts. However, in this life, Ella had all the necessary knowledge and skills to help his mother and the girls, and he promised himself that he would give his mother and the girls what his parents could not give him in his past life. The next day, Elle, his mother, and the girls were already supposed to be heading to the Einhart family estate, and he hoped that everything would go without incident there. A couple of hours later, Elle, her mother, and the girls were already standing at the gates of the Einhart estate. Elle and the girls were amazed by the size of the estate, which was even larger than the village of Banzark. First, the mother looked at the estate and realized that it had not changed at all since she was kicked out of the family, after which she approached the guard and demanded to let them in. At first, the guard did not want to let them in, but she said that Sylfir Einhart wanted to return home after 17 years in exile. The guard then apologized and ran to the estate grounds to inform the Marquise of his daughter's arrival. While her mother waited, she remembered that there was a rumor going around the continent that after the Marquise had driven his daughter away, the power of the Einhart family had begun to decline, and her father had become so melancholy that he had not eaten or drunk for a month. She also didn't understand what her father meant when, after Rayan's execution, her father told her that she should be grateful to him. Elle noticed again that his mother was thinking about something bad again, and he put his hand on her shoulder, letting her know that everything would be okay. In the distance, Mom noticed her father, Marquis, and her older brother, who were heading in their direction. The Marquis immediately grabbed his daughter and began to apologize to her for what he had done. Elle watched this from the outside and did not understand how a man like the Marquis, who had spent his entire life striving for glory for his family, would so sincerely apologize to the daughter he had exiled, and apparently he had some good reason for it. A little later, the Marquis notices his daughter Ella and asks her who this young man is. Mom told Marquis that this boy was her son, and at the same time his grandson, after which Elle himself introduced himself to his grandfather. At first glance, the Marquis seemed like a very friendly and benevolent person, but Elle saw how the Marquis began to examine his magical energy. The Marquis was very surprised that such a young boy was already in 5th grade. The Marquis continued to examine Elle's mana, and Elle kept thinking that he couldn't let the Marquis find out that he was actually a 7th grader. At one point, Sylfir's elder brother suggested continuing such a pleasant conversation inside the estate, and the Marquis supported this idea, after which everyone headed to the estate. A few minutes later, Elle, his mother, her older brother, and Marquis were sitting at the dining table having a family conversation, while Serena and Kana were sent off to rest. The Marquis decided to immediately ask his daughter if she was the creator of the magic stones. At the same time, the Marquis thought that when they learned the method of creating magic stones, their fortune would double, which would make their influence even greater, and then the Einhart family would become the most powerful on the continent. Elle looked at the Marquis and saw all his greed in his eyes, suspecting something was wrong. The Marquis told Sylphire that now that she had returned to her family, she must contribute to that family as it was her duty. Sylphire said that first her father must acknowledge Ella as a new member of the Einhart family. Sylphire said that it was her son who developed a new way to create magic stones, and that she had nothing to do with the creation of magic stones. She also pointed out to her father that when he looked at Elle, he saw him as a fifth-class master, from which Elle concluded that she also noticed how her father looked at him. Sylphire also added that despite the fact that there were 3 8th-class mages in the Einhart family, no one in the entire history of the family could achieve the same results that Elle was able to achieve at his age, and that he would soon become so strong that he would be able to amaze the entire empire with his skills. Sylphire also said that with such genius of Ella, the Einhart family will be able to become not just the most influential family in the Bliard Empire, but even the most powerful family on the entire continent. Afterwards, Sylphire asked her father if he was willing to accept her son as a new member of the Einhart family, to which the Marquis replied that it was too big a decision to make now. Sylphire interrupted her father and said that she came here specifically to make him one of them, and that they had to make a decision right now, which greatly surprised her father. Sylphire said that if they couldn't make a decision, then Elle wouldn't reveal the secret of creating magic stones to their family. The Marquis was very much struck by how strong and determined a character her daughter had developed, and he said that he would think about it. After this conversation, Elle decides to take a walk around the estate and talk to her about what happened to her during the conversation. Mom just said that everything would be fine, and that Elle shouldn't think about it. While Ella and her mother were walking around the estate, they met Serena and Kana. Mom immediately began hugging the girls and apologizing to them for having to leave them alone. The girls said that they were also very worried about them, after which their mother wanted to show the girls their rooms. Elle decides to stay in his room alone, where he couldn't stop thinking about how his mother spoke so boldly and didn't think that the Marquis would approve of her conditions. After all his thoughts, Elle summoned his magic glasses, which made it easier for him to concentrate. These glasses also reminded Elu of his past, in which he was a professional e-sportsman. These magic glasses also allowed Ella to see various magical flows, and he decides to check what the Marquis was really up to. Then Elle decides to follow her grandfather a little. But before that, he decides to use invisibility magic so that he doesn't notice him at the wrong moment. In a matter of seconds, Elle was already near the Marquis's room, from which he could learn all the details of his true plans. The Marquis told his eldest son that Ella had enough skills and abilities to become a new member of their family. However, the fact that Elle was in 5th grade at 17 years old did not change the fact that he grew up in a different country and therefore would be a stranger to their family. But the Marquis was also worried about the fact that he came here to avenge his father and Sylphire. The older brother reminded their father that Sylphire was a 6th grade master, and that could be a problem for them. The Marquis reminded his son that there were about 20 mages in their estate who were better than her and who could intervene if necessary. The Marquis also said that the Crown Prince sent him a reply letter in which he said that if the Marquis agreed, he would accept Sylphire as a concubine. However, the eldest son was worried that if things didn't go according to plan, she would find out that their family was kidnapping talented magicians and brainwashing them in order to later make them part of their association, which the Einhart family uses for personal gain. The Marquis immediately interrupted his son and told him to shut up, as someone would be able to hear their conversation even under the magic of silence. While Elle was eavesdropping on the entire conversation, he noticed that there were several special devices in this room that even 6th-class mages could not turn off. Then Elle thought that if someone found out about their plan and the kidnapping of talented magicians, it would become the biggest scandal in the entire history of the Bliard Empire. The eldest son said that he would no longer speak to the Marquis on this subject, to which the Marquis told him not to worry about the prince. The prince was also involved in this whole thing, and he would not do anything that could potentially harm him. After this, he hands one throwing knife to his eldest son and asks him what he would do in his place. The eldest son realized that this was a test, and that he would face extremely unpleasant consequences if he did not correct his mistake. Then he takes the knife and tells his father that he will first answer the prince that he is satisfied with this proposal, after which he would seize Ella and hold him hostage until Sylphire reveals to them the secret of creating magic stones. He also added that when he learns the secret of creating magic stones, he will send Sylphire to the prince, and if necessary, he is ready to use force and seal Sylphire's magical abilities. He also added that he would brainwash Elle and make him a magician who would serve their family, which El himself did not like at all. The Marquis was pleased with his eldest son's plan and said that he would now be the main successor. Ella couldn't help but think about the heartlessness of this family and that he might have refused his mother's offer to come here from the very beginning. He wondered why he couldn't stop or hinder his mother's suggestion to visit such a place. Instead, Al realized that he was intoxicated by his superiority over others and thought that he wanted to make everyone happy, no matter the circumstances. Besides, he wanted to respect his mother's decision, and now this was the result of that. Al could live with them trying to use him. He already suspected something in that direction. However, he could not forgive them for wanting to hand over his mother to the prince. Al became even more angry, which made him become a little careless. The Marquis realized that someone in the room was under an invisibility spell. Surprised, he wondered if the man had been there all along, and was surprised that he had not noticed or recognized him, and asked out loud who was hiding in the room. Then Al reached out and prepared a spell. The Marquis and his son noticed the surge of magic, but they had no time to react, because El had already finished using his modified Seed of Infinite Flame spell and released it. El revealed himself, which visibly surprised the Marquis and his son, who wondered if he had overheard their entire conversation, as the spell had a slight delay and exploded after a few seconds. The Marquis looked shocked when he realized what was about to happen. There was a powerful explosion, and a large fireball shot up through the roof of the estate into the sky. The first explosion was immediately followed by another, just as big, which tore everything apart. The earth was completely scorched by huge explosions, and the air was filled with ash and smoke. However, Marquis and his son did not appear to have any visible direct injuries from the blast. The Marquis was amazed by the spell I cast. It would take any other mage over half an hour to cast such a spell. Besides, it was a 7th-tier spell that could effortlessly kill thousands of people at once. Immediately after the explosion, guards from the family estate burst into the room where the heads of the two families were and asked if everything was okay. Looking at the small crowd of soldiers and the two leaders, Al floated slightly in the air and said that he was glad that they were still alive, as his anger was too great to end their lives so quickly. El extended his hand again, not giving them a chance to react to the small ball that formed under his palm, surrounded by a magic circle. Al told the small group standing below him that he wanted to ensure that they would suffer endless torment and ask for forgiveness, repenting of their actions for daring to raise their filthy hands against his family. He raised his hand and the small ball turned into a large magic circle behind him. El cast a summoning spell, proclaiming that suffering and destruction would befall those who stood in his way, his eyes filled with concentration and hatred towards the people present. He completed his summoning and his night golem in golden armor emerged from the interdimensional space. Standing behind Al, the guards could not believe what they saw, wondering how such a creature could have ended up here. The Marquis began to laugh, which prompted his son to ask if everything was okay and why he was laughing. With shining eyes, the Marquis declared that it was wonderful and the best thing he had ever seen. The few guards who had the courage to do so did not believe that the golem was real, and swore on behalf of the Inart family that they would not allow El to do as he pleased, and attempted to push the golem back. They rushed towards El and his golem. A small bright light blinked through the slits in the golem's helmet, signaling that it was fully operational. With one swift but incredibly powerful blow, the golem attacked the guards who dared to attack El, and all the guards went into the air. The eldest son could not believe what was unfolding before his eyes, and it seemed that his brain was even smaller than his father's. He looked down at the falling bodies, lying motionless on the ground, dead from the wounds inflicted by the golem's attack. The Marquis angrily stated that it was definitely not a fake, and stated that his family could now become the strongest family to ever exist with such a golem on their side. He pointed his finger at El and ordered the new guards gathered behind him to kill El and force him to reveal the secret of the golems. El's expression remained terrifying, clearly indicating that he had not shown all he was capable of. Enough money to retire, and why he needed more. The Marquis looked clearly confused, not understanding why El was looking at him like that. Al floated next to his golem, watching the attacking guards and the devastated charred land. Another magic circle hovered in front of his golem, reflecting attacks aimed at it. El began to position himself behind his golem and channel more of his mana into it, causing his mana to spread out in waves around him, slightly pushing away anything present in the individual humans. The guards realized the extreme power of this mana and realized that they could not resist it. Even the eldest son had to somehow defend himself from the mana controlled by El through his golem. The Marquis was also surprised and realized that this mana could not belong to someone who had just mastered the 5th stage of magic. It seemed to be on the level of a sword master, perhaps even stronger. He remembered researching Manuel during their first meeting in New York, and put a few things together. He realized that EL must be the magician who caused the two powerful explosions. He wondered if it was possible that EL was actually at the 7th stage of magic. When EL realized that the Marquis had finally realized how strong he really was, he couldn't help but grin confidently. The Marquis became angry, put his hands together, and also prepared a spell. Soon after, he cast his spell on El, and EL looked completely unperturbed and continued to float in the air, undisturbed. Al calmly raised his hand and directed some mana, and without much effort, he created a spell that allowed him to repel the attack. The ground beneath him burned, and the battlefield was raging in flames. Al was very angry and looked down, and below were the grandfather and uncle, who realized that they were not worthy of such a name. As Al was about to say what Marquis intended to do to them, he heard his name, as only his mother had called him Ellie on the battlefield. His mother, now joined by his sisters Serena and Kana, looked at El incredulously and couldn't believe what she saw. She asked him what happened. El looked sadly at his mother and said her name. He wondered why she was here and didn't want her to know what was going on, and the terrible plan her brother and father had for her. But remember the plan his mother's brother had come up with to get information from him about the magic stones, and what he intended to do with his mother afterwards. He also thought about how their father, as the head of the family, applauded and praised him for it. Al's mother called out to him again, asking him to answer. She saw how El looked and realized that she had never seen him so angry, knowing that something must have happened to upset her son so much. Al continued to look silently at his mother and brothers and sisters. Then he took a deep breath, realizing that he now had no other choice. He raised his hand again and formed a small sphere around which many magic circles revolved. These magic circles grew and pulsated outward. The Marquis recognized this as the magic of capture, and he was alarmed, wondering if El had recorded his conversation with his son, where they hatched their plan. In a panic, the Marquis quickly turned to his son and ordered him to kill El immediately, explaining that he was the one who had just caused the explosions. In anger, since she received no answer from her son, Silfer asked her father what was going on and why he ordered El to be killed for no reason. He told her to shut up. The Marquis found himself in a prediction, and it took him time to adjust to the situation and think. Silfer told him that El was his grandson, appealing to his good heart, hoping that he would change his mind about killing him. However, the Marquis seemed unperturbed and ordered his guards and son to hurry, warning them that El was a high-ranking mage. The guards were standing in a large group in front of El again, pointing their swords at him and preparing to fight. El looked relatively unfazed and simply ordered his golem to defeat the guards without killing them. The golem extended his hand, creating a golden sword, and assuring his master that he understood, accepted the command, and would carry it out to the best of his ability. His slightly chubby golem summoned sword glowed as bright as the sun and sparkled like the stars in the night sky. He held it in his right hand, while El floated slightly to the side to give his chubby golem some space. The fighting spirit of the guards and warriors of the Einhart family was not broken together. They raised their swords and proudly shouted their battle cry. Their first mission was to destroy the summoned sword. However, Al knew that this attempt was impossible. Since the golden sword was the symbol of his golem, it was forged from pure dwarven steel, with very few impurities, and coated with a magical metal for enchanted seals. The front of the blade was also coated in gold and infused with a spell to reflect the blow upon impact. In addition, it was reinforced with special sharpening magic to further enhance its existing power. El realized that, just like in his previous life, it was important to regularly upgrade his strongest unit to keep it effective. He was more of a realist than an idealist, and knew he had to push his golem's capabilities to the limit. The guardians and knights of the Einhart family remained in their battle formation, continuing to point their swords at El and his golem, channeling their energy. Golem El swung his flame-enchanted sword. A massive gold shock was created, and a wave broke through the ranks of the knights, forcing them to defend themselves from the swing's counter-reaction. Even the Marquis and his son couldn't believe what they were seeing. Amazed by the power of the slightly plump golden golem El, one of the guards warned not to underestimate this, taking up a fighting stance again. The golem struck a golden blow and flew towards the army of guards, splitting the sword in half and disrupting their battle formation. The golden golem continued to grow, and its shadow loomed over the heads of the guards. Upon seeing the golem up close, they realized its true size and the overwhelming power they were actually facing. However, some guards did not lose hope and urged their comrades to obey the orders of their master, not to panic and not to surrender. Another guard noticed following his friend the brave words of their fighter, who managed to ride out onto the battlefield inside the house on a horse. His horse was also adorned with light golden armor, and he himself was dressed in typical silver knight armor, adorned with a red cape. EL realized that this knight must be the leader and captain of the knights. Furthermore, he realized that this captain must be at the end of the swordmaster rank. The captain knelt before the Marquis and apologized for being late. However, the Marquis urged him to get to work immediately and defeat EL and his golem. The knight captain raised his head and said that he would do it immediately, saluted, and lowered his hand. The visor of his helmet and introduced himself. He explained that he was the knight captain of Marxia. The Einhart family and drew their sword. He enveloped his sword in a kind of mana, raised it, and thereby raised the fighting spirit of his subordinate knights, and called upon them to now destroy the enemy together. EL realized that the situation was going to get more serious, but he spoke quietly and calmly to his golden golem, asking it to switch to the second level. The golem replied that his seal had been successfully removed and was covered in golden light. At first, his arms became a little thinner, followed by a head on the shoulders. And finally, the rest of his body now looked much more flexible, quick and strong, ready to continue protecting EL. Moreover, since he was now somewhat thinner, he seemed even more frightening and aggressive. The guards who had rebelled against El and his golem knight were surprised by the sudden transformation. However, Al already knew that this was not all that had changed in his golem, and that the real changes were yet to come. Since the sword disappeared during the transformation, Golem had to summon it again, and it reappeared in his hand, enveloped in flames. He grabbed the sword and prepared for battle, taking a fighting stance, and the blade of the sword underwent some changes and was filled with much more energy than before. The knight leader realized that this must be an aura blade, which was actually much more powerful. El's golem swung his sword to the side and stepped forward without any visible protection, heading towards the army standing before him. The captain did the same, waving his sword, and asked if he looked so weak that he could approach without any cover. Both of them prepared to strike and simultaneously clashed their swords, causing a huge recoil and shaking the ground. The strike of two swords illuminated the surroundings, causing all participants to cover their eyes from the bright light. Only El continued to watch the spectacle in full focus, and still filled with immeasurable hatred for the Marquis and his son. When the bright light of the sword battle faded, the captain was left bleeding, and El's golem stood before him unharmed. The knight captain's bloody blade became lodged in the ground and he fell to the floor and died from his injuries. He couldn't believe what had just happened and that he had failed. His injuries were so severe that he died at that moment. The guards standing below him could not understand how their leader was easily destroyed with one blow and lay on the ground, which noticeably shook the morale of the army. However, the golem did not stop and immediately launched another attack. He swung his sword, releasing a flaming energy blade, and again attacked the Marquis, his son, and the army behind him. However, the army behind them was still hit by the attack, and soldiers were sent flying across the battlefield. The Marquis and his son were forced to look down at the bodies of their guards, and realized that these weak guards had died too easily and quickly. El also noticed that reinforcements for the family heads were approaching again, and he saw several mages in black robes advancing forward on the battlefield. He did not want to leave the matter alone, and was already planning his next steps before he could put those plans into action. He turned to his mother and summoned the sphere containing his recorded memories. He explained to her what he was going to do about it and asked if she was ready to see the truth. She replied that she was indeed prepared and knew that her son Al had a good reason for behaving the way he did. She knew that there must be something important in her son's memories that prompted him to attack the entire Einhart family, including her father and brother. El handed her a small sphere with his memories, and Marquis noticed this, but he knew he had to intervene, and his daughter should not see this under any circumstances. He looked at Golem El and realized that he would not be able to pass by him, since the golem's abilities far exceeded his own. Moreover, he realized that even if El was a 7th-level mage, he, his son, and the family mages only had a small chance of stopping him. In desperation, he realized that even if he managed to escape and elude El, his own family, which he had created with his own hands and strengthened at any cost, would be destroyed. El cast a protective spell to shield his mother from outside influence, allowing her to peacefully watch her son's memories. His mother was then imprisoned in a square cube, designed to protect her from all dangers. In a panic, Serena and Kana called out to their mother, but they could not see inside the cube as its walls were darkened. Meanwhile, Silfer held El's memories in her hand, and these memories expanded around her, revealing very interesting moments. She saw a memory of her father and brother discussing the prince's letter and deciding to introduce her as their mistress. In addition, she realized that the Einhart family had kidnapped many promising talents from other countries and brainwashed them to serve the family loyally. She then saw a memory in which her own brother explained to their father his plan, which involved mining silver against her will. Perhaps they intended to seal her magic and capture EL, then use him as leverage to force her to reveal the method of making the magic stones. Sylphur couldn't believe how shocking these revelations in her memories were to her. From further flashbacks, she learned that her father and brother also planned to brainwash Al into being loyal and show the prince another body similar to Al's to fake his death. When Sylphur saw her own father praising her brother for such a plan, she threw her hands above her head and her world came crashing down. She was on the verge of tears and fell to the ground. She tried to contain her emotions, remembering the first words her father had spoken to her upon his return, expressing regret at sending her away. She thought that deep down her father still retained some family feelings for her, and that they were still father and daughter. However, Sylphur could no longer hold back her tears and allowed her emotions to flow freely. She couldn't help but think about how happy she was with her son El. She should have known better than anyone how terrible this family really was. Now she blamed herself for bringing her beloved son here. She thought she should be indifferent to how these evil people used her as they pleased. But now, knowing that not only did they want to use her, but they were also planning to brainwash her son El, she couldn't just forgive them. They had already killed her beloved husband. She admitted that she never really hated them for it, because she always believed that the prince forced them to do it. However, now she realized that this was not true. These people simply did not know love or family and acted solely out of selfish interests. Sylphur bit her lip hard, trying to forget the internal pain and pull herself together. She clenched her fists and also realized that for her father, her brother, and the prince, everyone else was nothing more than tools to increase their own power. Sylphur realized that this was the true nature of these people, which she, unfortunately, had never fully understood before. But now she knew. As she came to terms with what had happened and gathered her courage, the cube that had imprisoned her for protection began to glow and shatter. Al looked a little sad, knowing that his mother was having a hard time accepting the truth. His mother folded her hands with tears in her eyes. However, she decided that no matter how painful it was now and how much she wanted to forget everything, she had to accept the truth. Serena immediately called out to her floating mother to make sure she was okay. Her mother was grounded and ready to face reality and confront it. With a determined expression on her face and a clenched fist, she told her son that she would no longer run away and was ready to fight. Al looked at his mother, relieved at her determination to confront the truth. He also noticed that there were still tears running down her cheeks, and that despite everything their family had done, she did not give in to hatred because they were still part of her family. However, in Al's case, this was not the case, and he looked at the Marquis and his son with all his hatred and anger, while they still stood together on the battlefield, doing nothing to change their situation. Al raised his hand into the air and created another magic circle, this one slightly different from his previous ones. He wanted to show the Marquis the Iron Mace of Justice. A large black phoenix, engulfed in black flames, appeared in front of the magical red circle. Phoenix immediately began to squeal loudly, forced the guards and the rest of the Einhart family army to cover their ears as the sound was too deafening. Even the eldest son had to cover his ears with the shield and was unable to resist EL's magic. The Marquis realized that EL was using the Force's sound magic to lower the morale of his subjects, and that EL was even able to crush his son, who was also at the 7th level of magic, using this magic, despite his son being at the 5th level. The Marquis then looked at EL with his glowing red eyes and used magic that directly penetrated EL's mind. Al heard a voice in his head praising him, telling him that he had done a good job. The Marquis looked at Al greedily and continued his magic, trying to further manipulate Al with his voice. Additionally, he offered a deal. If he switched sides, Marquis could arrange for his family to forget everything that happened that day, they could lead normal lives, and he would guarantee the safety of Al's mother and his 2 sisters. He then asked EL what he thought about the idea. Al was still looking at Marquis, feeling a strange sensation when he heard the voice in his head. He wondered if it was a brainwashing spell. Floating in the air, Al couldn't believe that the evil old man not only wanted to bewitch his father, other magicians and mother, but was now trying to do it to him too. EL turned to the Marquis and asked him a question. When Marquis looked down at EL, he realized that his brainwashing spell had no effect on him and that EL was indeed at the 7th level of magic. In response to Al's question about how he could do something so cruel to his family, Marquis was initially stunned and briefly shocked, but then he started laughing. He raised his hands up and laughed like a villain from an old comic book. The Marquis explained to EL that many aristocrats sold their children for the sake of their family, and that this was actually normal. El continued to look down at him, realizing that this man was no longer a man, but more like a monster. The Marquis then asked Al where he learned such magic and praised him for reaching the 7th level at the age of 17, which was an impressive achievement. El realized that he was actually talking to a monster, interested only in revealing his secrets. He floated a little longer above the Marquis and told him that he had learned everything himself and that no one else had taught him these skills. The Marquis still did not want to believe him and stated that it did not seem that he had learned the truth from him. In response, Al said that he hated and detested people like Marquis, most people who see their family as tools and treat them as such. Nevertheless, El raised his hand and made an offer to the Marquis. Curiously, the Marquis asked what it was. El asked him if he would be allowed to leave with his family and tell the truth about what he had done to his son and the prince. El held a small gold coin in his hand and explained that the coin contained his memories, which he had imprinted using his magic. The Marquis was shocked, as Al knew that this truth would threaten the Einhart family. But he also realized that the fact that the prince was involved in Ing's kidnapping and brainwashing was just as harsh. If it were revealed that the prince was involved in countless battles against the kingdom, various families could wage them, which could lead to the fall of the mighty Blard kingdom. Al looked at the coin and saw the reflection of the Marquis and his son. He said they could prevent him from spreading this information, and therefore the truth, by fighting each other without interference from outsiders. The Marquis told his son to get ready, leaving his son somewhat shocked as he turned to his father, not quite understanding what was going on. The Marquis explained to his son that it would be more advantageous for them to attack simultaneously and urged them to do everything possible. His son had the same crazy smile on his face as his father, and he agreed. El looked at his two opponents and knew it was time to get serious. He touched his head with his finger and used a little magic. Then he prepared to attack, holding the ball in his hand. He told the Marquis and his son that they had greatly underestimated him and angrily turned his magic on them, showing them what despair was. However, the Marquis and his son were able to directly counter El's first attack with a counterspell that looked much darker than the spell I had missed. When the two spells collided, another powerful explosion occurred. Meanwhile, in another place, a man melted before his king and greeted him. The king told the man that they had probably heard already, but still informed them that there were witnesses reporting the use of 7th-level magic. The red-haired man, Duke Klin, who was kneeling before his king, confirmed that he had heard about it too. The king explained that this was a very serious matter, and if a member of the Einhart family was responsible for the 7th-tier magic and the resulting explosion, he would hold them personally responsible. The red-haired man asked why he had to interfere at the end, to which his king explained that the Einhart family had become too powerful, and this was a good opportunity to weaken them a little again. Duke Klin expected no less from his king, who ruled over all. The king told the duke that he would lend him 10 men from his royal knights and 100 men from the central order. Knowing that the duke would lead and deploy them properly, he entrusted this mission entirely to the duke. The duke looked up and accepted the task he had been given, intending to carry it out to the best of his ability. As he was about to leave, he heard a voice. Another person joined the conversation. It was the Prince of Alka. The king asked the prince what he wanted. The prince said he wanted to ask a favor, and asked if he had heard correctly that the duke was now on his way to Marquis Einhart. The duke immediately confirmed this. The prince then asked if he could accompany him, expressing a desire to take advantage of the opportunity to reduce the Marquis's influence and power. He looked at the duke and the king with a conflicted expression on his face, for his real goal on this journey was Silfer. He wanted to make sure he took advantage of this opportunity to win her over. The king asked the prince if he believed he could deal with the Einhart family and defeat them. The prince answered the king's question by saying that he thought he could handle it and that it would be a good experience for him. The king gave permission and ordered the duke and prince to proceed carefully to the Einhart estate. Both understood the order and prepared to leave. Each of them was on his own horses, and the prince told the duke that he was already glad to work with him. The duke replied that now that the prince had joined his mission, he was not sure if there was anything else for him to do. The prince laughed amiably and agreed with the duke's words. However, Klin was still not sure that he was accompanied by the prince, and looked at him questioningly from behind. The prince shouted loudly for everyone to show their enthusiasm, which caused the knights accompanying the prince and the duke to applaud loudly, demonstrating their zeal. They went to the Einhart family estate to investigate and weaken the Marquis's power. Meanwhile, the battle between Marquis and El continued, and the earth shook repeatedly. El was still floating in the air, creating a space hand with his magic, ready to attack the Marquis. However, the Marquis laughed in the face of the danger posed by El's spell, and was surprised at how fast and powerful El's spells were. As El continued his attack on Marquis, the latter couldn't help but think that normally, none of his opponents had the chance to attack him, as he would defeat them the moment they prepared their spell. The eldest son prepared a spell, raising his fingers like Naruto casting a spell. Runes appeared around him, forming a magical circle of fire magic around his fingers. Shortly after, he cast a firestorm spell and sent it towards El. Smiling, he was curious to see how El would handle his attack. El prepared to counter the attack and also used magic to create a massive earthen wall to block the fire attack. The Marquis, who still had no idea that he shouldn't engage in battle with El, took the opportunity to use his lightning magic arrow and attack El. However, El effortlessly parried the Marquis's magic with a few steps and repelled his attack. Now it was Al's turn to strike back. He extended both his hands forward, creating a magic circle around them, which formed a kind of magical armor around Al's body. El controlled the elements of fire, light, wind, water, and earth magic around him, similar to the Avatar from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He combined this magic and threw several stones at the Marquis and his son, who could not believe what they saw. But El wanted to show more and went further, using the same technique and launching a second attack directly at the Marquis and son, not giving them a chance to resist. The eldest son couldn't believe his eyes. He was surprised that El only needed to see his secret technique once, and now he could use it even faster than him. He cursed, but still managed to cast a protective spell and shielded himself with 3 magical barriers to withstand El's attack. However, the flame was too strong and destroyed every shield. Just before they could reach the Marquis's son, he managed to teleport to safety, dodging the flame. The eldest son teleported high into the air and then planned to catch El off guard and launch a counterattack. However, Glutton was unable to determine El's position and frantically looked left and right to find his opponent. Suddenly, Al appeared behind his uncle and told him that he was too slow and would never surprise him like he had just done. He turned around and saw that El realized he was moving too fast. El extended his hand again, preparing to finish off his uncle. The shocked eldest son used magic again and quickly flew to the ground, escaping from Al's grip. El cast some sort of Japanese hentai spell with tentacle-like magical manifestations in an attempt to trap his uncle. The Marquis recognized the spell I used and knew that the net spell was meant to restrict the enemy's movements. But he also knew that his son could easily handle such a spell. The eldest son raised his finger, releasing a small ball that caused a fiery vortex to push back the mesh tentacles. He was sure that such a spell would do little against him. Then El rushed at his uncle with his magic, but Glutton continued to defend himself from El's attack with his fire magic. The Marquis watched the spectacle from a safe distance and was pleased that El's tentacle net attack had failed, knowing that net magic was at a disadvantage compared to fire magic, and he smirked smugly. Meanwhile, El and the Marquis's son continued their intense battle, neither of them willing to give up. The eldest son was clearly on the defensive. El, who had to conserve some of his strength and could not fight as ruthlessly as his opponents, went on the offensive. The Marquis saw another opportunity to launch a surprise attack. The sky darkened and lightning flashed through the dark clouds. The Marquis extended his hand towards the sky, and magical runes formed around him again. He praised his son for holding back El, allowing him to prepare the spell. Everything was going exactly as he planned. He looked up at the sky, confident that the next attack would defeat El when he was ready. The Marquis already had a triumphant smile on his face, knowing that it could all end at any moment. The lightning continued to approach El, who stood motionless and made no attempt to defend herself from it. He looked at the lightning the same way a deer looks at the headlights of a car at night. But at the last moment he grinned, and with the help of his magic he summoned a massive lightning rod, intercepting all the lightning before it touches him, rendering Marquis's attack completely ineffective. The Marquis could not believe it and considered it impossible what had just happened before his eyes. El told him that his attack was not bad, and he really surprised him. Still unable to believe that El had successfully defended himself from his thunderstrike, Marquis asked what kind of magic it was. Then El turned around and with a smile on his face asked him why he should reveal this to him. He said that it would be foolish to share such important and valuable information with his enemy. This arrogance, this smirk, and the fact that he couldn't use this power made the Marquis furious. El looked at his lightning rod with pride, realizing that it was very effective, successfully absorbing all the light magic. He knew that firebending was usually considered the opposite of waterbending, but as a defensive method, waterbending was not very effective since firebending could boil water and burn the waterbending user. From a young age, El did a lot of research because he was interested in learning about different types of magic. He found that the best way to counter fire magic was earth magic, and that water magic was best countered with plant magic. Against the wind, a magic stone or iron magic will be most effective. Only what to use against lightning magic puzzled him, since it was more difficult than other types of magic. He knew that weak lightning magic could be easily stopped by stone or iron magic, but if it was strong lightning magic, simple stones or iron would not be enough. It was then that he remembered his old readings about lightning rods in his world. It was the first time that El tried this type of magic, and for a first attempt, the result was impressive. It worked perfectly, neutralizing a 7th-level lightning spell. El took the opportunity to look at the Marquise's son. He was also surprised that El countered his father's magic with his own unknown magic. For a second, the eldest son forgot that he was in the center of a life-or-death battle. El took advantage of the moment and shouted at him that this was his end. He summoned his cosmic hand again, which appeared from the portal right in front of his eldest son, and dealt a powerful blow, sending him to the ground. The Marquis looked in shock at his son lying on the ground, unable to fully understand what had just happened. And El said that now it is a one-on-one fight. Al looked at the Marquis's son and realized that he would most likely lie in bed for a whole year and not be able to move. He pointed to Marquis and told him that he would be next. El used his flame arrow magic, creating a large number of magical arrows in the night sky, lighting it up and ready to descend on the Marquis. The Marquis stretched his hands forward in fear, realizing that El's magic was no joke, and his situation had become more serious than ever before. He tried to create a shield like he did before to protect himself from El's attack, and then he responded with his own Fire Blast spell, aiming it straight at El. However, El also easily deflected this spell and responded with his own spell, Infinity Magic Arrow. He created arrows in the sky, aimed straight at the ground below him, only much smaller in size. But as the name suggests, there were an infinite number of them. El explained to the Marquis that while these arrows may be smaller and weaker individually, their infinite number makes them extremely powerful. The Marquis did not know what to answer, and simply looked into the air in amazement. As the arrows rained down on him, he used shield magic again to protect himself. El's arrows rained down on the Marquis's shield one after another, putting significant pressure on it and pushing it back. The arrows continued to fly, and the shield was on the verge of giving way under the enormous strain. Even in the current situation, the Marquis could not believe that he was fighting such base magic. He wondered how he could fight so hard against a second-rate mage, and realized that he should be called the most powerful mage on the continent. He looked at El and realized he was just fighting a 17-year-old kid. Suddenly, an idea occurred to Marquis, and he wondered if El was really only 17 years old. He thought that such an understanding of magic and these complex strategies must come from someone much more experienced and older. He couldn't know that El was already in his second life and had lived his previous life as Kim Jun-nung. He looked at El and wondered who he could be and why his family was completely destroyed because of him and cursed him. Finally, the Marquis's shield shattered like a broken mirror into many small pieces. He looked through the debris and saw that El's attack was still approaching him. Many arrows continued their journey and now finally reached their target. The Marquis fell rapidly from the arrows he received. The Marquis bled to death from several direct hits and fell to the ground, defeated and bloodied, just like his son. His guards could not believe what had just happened before their eyes and shouted the Marquis's name to check if he was still conscious. Finally, El landed on the ground. His anger did not subside, and he looked at the fallen Marquis with fury and hatred. He said that he would not kill him and his son, as that would not be a fitting punishment for them. Instead, he wanted to take away their ability to use magic, as they intended to do to his beloved mother. The weight pressing down on Marquis increased, pushing him into the ground. El explained that he would not kill them, but still wanted to hurt them more. Runes formed around him and he was about to cast his bone-breaking spell. And suddenly, a loud bang was heard over the battlefield, and El came to his senses. He turned to his mother and saw that she, along with her sisters, is still standing on the edge of the battlefield. El looked at his family with sad eyes, on Serena Kana and his mother, who told him that enough was enough and she asked him to stop. El wasn't sure why she said that and remained silent, looking at his mother in amazement. His mother knew of her son's talent and how great it was, but she could hardly believe that at the tender age of 17, he had already reached the 7th level of magic and was capable of creating such a powerful golem. A golem that managed to defeat a swordmaster with just one blow, something no other mage had ever managed to do before. She realized that her little son had grown into such a powerful magician without her knowledge. However, she also knew that the man El was fighting against was her father. And while she couldn't forgive her father and brother for trying to kill Al or brainwash him, she also couldn't allow Al to kill her father and brother. She told El that he had taught them a lesson, and that should be enough. She didn't believe that her father and brother would ever hatch again and carry out such plans. However, Al said he could not fulfill her request. He looked at the Marquis's son and his grandfather. Al said that if he let them go, they would be the ones who would come back for revenge. His mother said that this may be true, but killing them would still be wrong, since, in addition, She explained to EL that he still has memory magic with which he can prove their plans at any time, and therefore, they cannot recklessly seek revenge as long as he can use those memories against them. Al thought about it and realized that his mother might be right. Besides, he thought that if he deprived the Marquis of his ability to use magic, the entire kingdom would turn against them. It would mean putting his entire family in danger. El agreed with his mother and stated that he would not harm her father and brother. He turned away from the fallen Marquis and told his family that they should leave this vile place as quickly as possible. Moreover, Al advised his mother that with her abilities and 6th place in magic, they could find a place far away and lead a peaceful life. His mother agreed and humbly wished for exactly what her son wanted, and shamefully admitted that Al was right, and was forced to admit that, although she was the adult between them, she was wrong. Under the full moon and a cloudy night, she had to admit her mistake. After bringing El to Marquis and telling her that it was all her fault that led to the current situation, she looked into Al's eyes and told him that while power might be important in life, love within family was much more important. Al looked at his mother a little melancholically and thought about his family from his past life, but agreed with her statement that family was the most important thing. Al pulled himself together and asked his 2 sisters if they wanted to come with them and continue to be a part of this family. Al's mother, Serena and Kana, were a little confused as to why he suddenly asked this when the answer was already clear. However, Kana said that she would of course stay with him and go with him wherever he went. Serena also said she wants to be with him and their new mother wherever they go. Al's mother was pleased that her 2 adopted daughters wanted to stay with them and her son, and she seemed quite happy. Al walked up to his family and thanked them for deciding to accompany him. However, he still had something to do, and he turned around to summon his golden golem. He walked straight up and headed towards El, ready to receive further commands. Al praised his golem for the outstanding work it had done on the battlefield and decided it was time to give it a fitting name. He named his golem Tana, and it shone with a golden glow, expressing gratitude to its master and creator for this name. Just as El was about to use his teleportation magic and disappear along with his family, a man suddenly appeared from behind and said that he could not let them leave now. El immediately turned around and Tana was ready to confront the stranger. Tana quickly parried the attack of the unknown person who tried to stop El, while El also used magic to protect his family. The attack was furious and it was difficult for Tanya to stop it. The clash of forces grew stronger and stronger until it caused an explosion that raised a little dust. El realized that this attack was truly powerful. Laughing smugly, the prince stepped out from behind Duke Klin, declaring that he expected nothing less from him, the captain of the royal guard. El immediately recognized him. Realizing that the man next to the prince was not an ordinary person, he knew that he needed to step up his game to avoid losing, and he called on Tana to activate the 3rd mode. The golem, who had just defended himself from another attack by the client Duke to protect El and his family, broke another of his seals at El's command, activating his 3rd stage. Tana raised her hand and blocked Duke Klein's attack without much effort. He even managed to push the Duke and the prince back a little. However, when Klin noticed that he was being forced into a defensive position, he stopped the attack, curiously asked El who he was. He was amazed and acknowledged Al's talent, but also noted that a man with such talent should usually fight on the side of the kingdom. El listened to Duke Klein without resistance. The Duke continued to state that he did not really want a conflict with him, but felt he had no other choice given the circumstances. At this point, the prince interrupted him and asked what he was saying, pointing at El. The prince grinned greedily, his thoughts focused solely on achieving his ultimate goal of making Sylphur, El's mother, his own. El clenched his fist angrily, immediately realizing the prince's true intentions and realizing that it was all just a ploy to make his beloved mother his mistress. The moon slowly disappeared behind thick clouds. El told Duke Klin that he needed to apologize, but he had no intention of joining the kingdom, which he stated by angrily pointing at the prince that he would destroy him now. He ordered Tanya to keep the Duke busy until he could accomplish this, which Golem immediately understood and was ready to do. Tana once again channeled the golden energy into her hand and summoned a golden sword, which somehow always disappeared whenever its next seal was broken. Duke Klin and Tana faced each other, preparing for battle. Al hovered in the air, focusing his attention on the prince. He made it clear that he would be his opponent by impressively manipulating the mana around him to strengthen it for his next attack. With intense concentration on the battlefield, Prince El declared that they should begin. This alarmed the prince, as El had already warned him not to look at his mother with his dirty, disgusting eyes. Sylphur called out her son's name from below, causing Al to turn around and ask his mother what she wanted now. She begged him to leave it and go away, since it was too dangerous to confront the prince and fight him. El listened carefully to his mother, absorbing every intonation every hint and every emotion that penetrated the sounds of her speech. He assured her that they shouldn't worry because he already had a plan. He explained that leaving the prince unpunished would also be too dangerous. He then turned his attention to the soldiers on the ground, along with the duke and prince on the battlefield. He raised his hand and cast the infinity magic arrow spell again. In the sky, under the infinity symbol, a multitude of small arrows appeared, aimed at the prince and his guard. El made a fluid gesture and commanded the bolts of his magic to rain down on his opponents. And in the sky, luminous arrows appeared, rapidly moving downwards, reminiscent of the starry sky. The guards defended themselves by holding their hands above their heads and ducking slightly to deflect the arrows. But Al realized that the attack was not intended to cause significant damage, but rather to disrupt their formation. He quickly created a large hammer and attacked the prince to disorient him. The prince could only marvel as El suddenly appeared in front of him and struck him. With a powerful and critical blow, El swung his hammer, directly hitting the prince. With this blow, the prince went flying far, imperceptibly causing damage. Eventually, the prince and his guards lay on the ground, bleeding and groaning from the serious injuries they had sustained. El placed his massive hammer on his shoulder, knowing that this attack should have caused serious internal wounds to the prince. He knew that external wounds could be easily healed with divine magic, but internal wounds would take longer to heal successfully. Duke Klin was still fighting with Tana, but upon seeing the defeated prince, he still managed to ask how he was doing. Duke Klin wanted to help the prince, but he also knew that if he was distracted even for a second, he would be in grave danger, since Tana was an honorable opponent for him. Tana gained the upper hand in the battle, forcing the Duke into a defensive position. Although it seemed as if Tana would win the battle, Al ordered her to stop and return to the inner space. She immediately understood her master's command and signaled it with a short glance up through the slit in her helmet. Tana was glowing and was about to disappear into interspace. The Duke shouted that he would not let her escape so easily and began a new attack. Around him, numerous small magical sword blades appeared, aiming at Tana, who was still in the process of disappearing. The Duke's swords flew towards her with lightning speed and pierced her entire body. Tana's hand was critically hit. As a result, he fell and collapsed to the ground. The Duke laughed with satisfaction, realizing that his attack had worked on the golem. However, not even a second had passed before Tana's hand appeared on her body again, and she moved it to make sure it was attached correctly. The Duke looked somewhat surprised and couldn't help but curse. Tana glowed brighter and disappeared as El ordered. Although the Duke admitted defeat in this battle, he chuckled for a moment, sighed with relief, and was forced to admit that he thought he had caught her in the last attack, but realized that she had disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then the Duke looked at El, who was behind him. Al, who was holding the commemorative coin in his hand, showed it to the Duke. El extracted the memories from the coin and created a copy in the form of a small ball. He looked at the newly created, or the group explained that he would destroy the coin, but made a copy of it earlier. As the prince lay unconscious, bleeding and groaning on the ground, El stated that everything he had done was contained within this memory magic. He emphasized that he would not hesitate to spread this information throughout the kingdom, or even the entire continent if the Duke or his family ever tried to harm him again. His mother and sisters came running to him and were glad that everything went well, and he was not hurt. El turned to Duke Klin and apologized for the disturbance and inconvenience. As he used his magic and the runes of his teleportation spell appeared around him, he told the Duke that he hoped they would never meet his enemies again and bid him farewell. The Duke still couldn't believe that El was really a villain, and could only watch in amazement as he teleported away with his family. Duke Klin was not a bad man, and also admitted that El was truly a genius, and he wished he had met him under different circumstances. Watching the battlefield closely and seeing the wounded knights, he thought about how to explain the situation and plan his next steps. However, the news of the appearance of a very young mage in his golden knight golem, as powerful as the Grandmaster, spread throughout the continent, covering all the countries. It was a shocking debut in this world. El and his family settled into a new little cottage on the edge of the mountain, having spent some time in peace and quiet without any power-hungry tyrants. The sun was shining, smoke was rising from the chimney, and the general atmosphere was extremely calm. Al tapped his index finger on the table. He thought about what to do next, trying to put the book in the subspace bag. He realized that he had literally destroyed the Einhard estate, defeated his uncle and grandfather, and inflicted severe internal and external damage on the prince. He admitted that he had committed these crimes and would not be able to return to Banzar, where he had originally intended to go with his mother, without causing further harm. El opened the window and saw the bright sun outside. He couldn't even blame the kingdom if they chased and killed him here and now. However, he knew they would never do that, because he still had the memory magic that could prove their dark deeds. He stood by the window and enjoyed the peace around his new home. He realized that he had learned a lot during the fight, which he won very calmly. His casting time, the time it took him to prepare his spells, and his ability to combine spells were better than any other mage on the continent. The protagonist was also confident that he would become even stronger if he learned a few auxiliary spells. Al also realized the amazing potential of Tana, his golden golem knight. He remembered that he had managed to overcome even the Grand Master Duke and gain the upper hand for a short time. The past 5 years of hard work he had put into his skills, and his golem had not been in vain and would finally bear fruit. It was definitely worth putting so much effort into himself and his golem. He knew that if he could produce more of them, he could conquer the entire world with such an army. However, he also knew that creating such a golem would take 3 years, and the cost of such production was very high and could not be easily borne. Furthermore, El realized that the most important lesson he learned from the battle with the Marquis and his son was that the strength of a group is greater than the strength of an individual, and that there were things he could not handle alone, and in those cases he had to accept them. After the battle, as rumors of El spread throughout the world, many countries began hiring people to search for him. Al was sure that some of these people were not necessarily friendly and had evil intentions. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, interrupting Al's thoughts. When Al turned around, his mother asked if she could come in. He said that she could invite her to his room. She walked in with his 2 sisters, Serena and Kana. Serena and Kana looked relatively happy, but his mother looked a bit worried and had a sad expression on her face. El asked what happened, knowing that everyone was a little awkward after the incident and needed time to process what happened. His mother nervously played with her hands and hesitantly asked her son how long it had been since he had become so strong. El explained that he hid his strength because he knew no one would believe that he could reach such a level at such a young age. The mother believed him and softened her saddened face. She realized that no matter what, he was still her son, the son she had raised, and who was the son of her beloved husband. She apologized with a happy expression and said that she regretted treating him differently without knowing that he had his reasons. Al tried to lighten the mood further by jokingly wondering what she would think if he gained a lot of fans by sharing and revealing his identity as a genius in magic. His mother laughed and advised him to stay humble. With a smile on his face, Al continued to joke with his mother, telling her and his sisters that he had something important to discuss with them. They were curious and looked at their brother, asking what was so important that he wanted to discuss it with them because of the incident at the Einhart family estate that he was in charge of. Al explained that they could no longer return to Banzar. He pointed to a place on the map and explained that there were 5 kingdoms in total in the west of the Syrian continent, and that there were many mage towers in that region. Al, with a beaming smile and full of excitement, announced that he planned to create his own magical tower there. Kana was a little confused and asked if she had heard correctly that he wanted to create his own magical tower. El explained to her that it would be a tower similar to the one they had in their hometown, where the Tower Master used to live. Kana was delighted with the idea, and her sister asked Al where he was going to build such a tower. Al pointed to the map again and showed his family a small place called the Tone Kingdom. The Tone Kingdom was a large place with fertile lands, a large population, and a stronger military than its neighboring countries. He raved that it was a strong nation, but it did not yet have a mage tower. He also mentioned that the surrounding lands were inhabited by monsters, and the locals suffered significant losses every year because of this, especially in a small place called Mantic or the Valley. El said that if they offered to destroy this place for the Tone Kingdom, they would surely appreciate the gesture. His mother asked if there was anything else he could tell, and wondered what she would think of the proposal. El continued by saying that the king was a good man, and the nobles around him trusted and believed in him. However, he also admitted that the princes had a dispute among themselves which the king could not resolve. The main problem they needed to solve for his plan to work were the monsters living in the estate's valley and the nearby orc forest. El was confident that the military strength of the Tone Kingdom would be enough to deal with the orc forest, but if they concentrated all their forces there, they would not be able to deal with Mantic or the valley. So El explained that he would take over the governance of this valley, and if he succeeded, it would be able to expand the kingdom's influence. Al's mother, Kana and Serena stood in the room, thinking. Kana gathered her courage and was the first to ask her brother if they could also find her a master who could teach her fencing. El had to admit that they should do this too, although he could show her some breathing techniques. Since he wasn't a swordsman, he couldn't provide any additional help, so he told her that they would definitely find a suitable teacher for her. Kana was overjoyed and thanked him. However, Serena also wanted to become stronger, and asked her brother if he could help and continue her training. With her hands clasped together, she explained that she had felt very weak during the events at the Einhart family estate. She originally thought that she could defend herself, but when she saw the elf fighting against the Marcus and his son, she realized that she was not as strong as she imagined in terms of determination and ambition, and expressed her desire to become stronger. A sudden feeling of surprise entered Al's heart, causing him to freeze for a moment. But it also made him beaming and happy as he was eager to fulfill his sister's request. Their mother also said that she wanted to become stronger and asked him to teach her too. "Maybe you should start with using your brain. That will help a lot," he joked. Everyone looked happily at El, who shared the common desire to become them all, and asked if they agreed, smiling at them. After that, it was time to leave your cozy home and prepare for the next adventure, a journey to the kingdom. Faint, incomprehensible sounds were heard in the nearby forest. The king of the Tone Kingdom came out with his guards and stopped in the middle of the road. When he heard sounds with alarm, they looked left and right to find the cause. The king wondered with concern whether civilians would continue to be in danger under such circumstances, and whether there was a hero who could save them. Suddenly, a black and creepy shadow in the shape of a devil appeared in front of them, watching them. However, the king and his guards continued on their way despite the dangerous forest and noise. Eventually, they reached a cliff that offered a beautiful view of the Tone Kingdom. The Duke, a friend of the king, asked him what he was thinking about, whether he was worried and whether there were any problems. The king, looking worried, explained to his friend Lias what he thought of his 3 sons. He described how the conflict between them over who should be his successor was growing more intense every day, and he feared that one day his kingdom would suffer because of this struggle. Lias knelt before his majesty, trying to console him. He said that just as rain falls on the ground and nourishes the earth, he was sure that this conflict between his sons would somehow strengthen and unite the kingdom. He went on to explain that he believed the king should appoint his 3rd son, Prince Judean, as crown prince, for the good of the kingdom, as he wanted to discuss whether he should choose first Prince Maxel or second Prince Kron. As the crown prince king interrupted him with a sigh, he himself knew that Maxel treated people like things, and his personality was not at all like good, it was terrible and cruel. He also knew about his second son, Kran, who had qualities similar to Maxel, although not so obviously displayed. He had to admit that neither of the two were fit to be king. Instead, the king recognized that his 3rd son, Judean, was a warm and friendly leader whom his subjects deserved and whom he would prefer to appoint as king for their welfare. Unfortunately, 90% of the aristocrats supported either his first son, Maxel, or his second son, Crane. Among Judy and the reporters was the supreme swordmaster and leader of the royal guard, Captain Duke Lias, and also the capital swordmaster, Captain Count Lumo. This ensured a balance between the 3 sons, since the 2 leaders of the knightly order stood on Judean's side. But the king did not even want to think about what would happen if the first and second princes went against their younger brother and tried to overthrow him. The very thought of it made him ache. But he also had to remember the affairs of the kingdom. He knew he had to try to handle government affairs while keeping an eye on the monsters. Suddenly, the king realized that he was talking to himself and wondered where his friend Duke Lias had gone. He turned to see Duke Lias and his guards standing tensed in front of him, ready to protect his majesty. The warning Duke Lias drew his sword and urged the king to remain at a distance and be careful. The guards realized that they were surrounded. One of the guards asked if they were surrounded by monsters, at which the other guard turned suspiciously and began to laugh dirty. Suddenly, the cunning guard attacked the one who had just asked the question. The king and Duke Lias did not understand what was happening and fell into a stupor. Duke Lias asked why he did such a thing and why he killed his comrade. The wily guard stated that they were enemies from the start, and more hidden guards emerged from the nearby bushes. Duke Lias stood bravely before his king and ordered the rest of the guards to do everything to protect him. The traitorous guards told the king to wait a little longer and that it was only a matter of time before they captured him. She pointed her sword at him and declared that she wanted to kill him herself and would do everything to achieve this goal. The king realized that he had trusted his guards, who turned out to be traitors. He knelt down on the edge of the rock and asked his god if he had left him and his kingdom. Meanwhile, in the chambers of the magic tower, the master of the tower sat at a table and communicated with 2 other masters of the tower through their magic. 2 magically created screens with runes floated in front of him. One of the mages on the other side of the screen asked why he had initiated this meeting when their master was away. The one who called the meeting and sat at the table was the magical master of the Karasan Tower. He had a cool red beard and mustache, and red hair. The unfriendly mage on the other end of the line remarked that he hoped Cosmin had not forgotten that they all had a lot to do and did not have time to attend this meeting. He raised his finger and began to talk about the first important information. The information was that the plan to assassinate the current king of the Tone Kingdom in Manor Village was already underway. Once the king dies, the first Prince Maxwell will take the throne and everything else. Raisin, one of the mages sitting at the other end of the screen, suggested that they use the army to subjugate other nearby nations, and use your golems to rid the nearby monster country of monsters. Raisin adjusted his glasses and said that it should be an easy task for the golems, since they were the strongest on the entire continent. Cosmin continued and explained that their master also had news about a night golem in the Blard Kingdom. Raisin was extremely surprised and couldn't believe his ears when Cosmin said this and asked what it meant, and who else could have created such a night golem, if not him. Cosmin explained that a serious incident had occurred in the Einhart family, in which a 7th-level mage and his Olam Knight played a decisive role. Raisin was again amazed, his eyes wide open. Cosmin explained to the other 2 mages that the power coming from the night golem must be at least that of a grandmaster, and also mentioned that the golem had its own consciousness. Raisin was speechless and had to think for a moment, and stroking his beard, he continued to explain that if the Oraron had disappeared, he would not have been able to create the night golem. Moreover, it will take about 30 days to create his regular golem. Raisin couldn't believe that someone else besides him was capable of creating night golems, and at the level of a grandmaster, with their own consciousness no less. However, Cosmin said that this was only half the reason to worry, because he knew that it would take several years to create such a powerful golem. However, he said that they couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So he instructed Raisin to gather information about this golem and asked if he understood. Raisin wanted to find and do everything possible to find this man and talk to him personally. While the king was in ambush and Cosmin, Raisin, and another unknown mage were discussing their insidious plans, our main hero El just lay on the wall and calmly relaxed. He realized that he was indeed in the kingdom now, but wondered how he could contact the king. He knew that spreading rumors of his presence wasn't the best idea, as it might attract the attention of the Einhart family in the Blard Kingdom, exposing his hiding place. He wanted to somehow meet and talk to the king in a normal and discreet manner, but he couldn't think of any ideas on how to achieve that. He turned away from the wall and desperately wondered what he should do. Al's mother stood next to his sisters, mentioned that she was hungry, and suggested that they look for a small place to eat together. Al straightened up and agreed, as he wanted to eat too. Suddenly he felt something and it hit him like lightning. He wondered where this sudden surge of power was coming from. He recognized the wavelength of the energy and realized that it must be the power of a swordmaster. Quickly he jumped up and realized that the power he felt was coming from the north, as Al probably forgot to speak, and it all happened so quickly that his mother asked what was wrong with him. El skillfully ignored the question and noticed that there was a sudden surge of power coming out of the forest where there shouldn't normally be people. He also realized that the place was very close to the royal palace and wondered if the king might be somehow involved in this. Al's mother continued to ask in bewilderment what was wrong with him and even said his name, but Al only apologized and sailed away, telling his family to go and have dinner without him. Duke Leas and his loyal guards, who were not traitors, surrounded their king and did everything they could to protect him. However, Leas knew that many enemies had taken advantage of the cover of darkness and were using this opportunity to ambush the king. He knew that if the situation did not change soon, there could be grave danger, and the king would die. Suddenly, one of the enemy knights attacked, shouting the king's name. Faced with the sword flying towards him, the king wondered if this was his end. However, just in time, El created a shield in front of the king, which curled up behind him, reflecting the knight's attack. The king looked around in amazement, wondering what had just happened and what had protected him from the warrior's attack. Al flew out onto the battlefield and said he had no idea what was going on, but he didn't like the idea of someone being so treacherously ambushed under the cover of darkness. He considered this a bad sign and did not want the attackers to simply run away. El looked out over the battlefield and asked the enemy soldiers if they needed a minute to come up with excuses. However, they remained in their fighting stance and said nothing. El thanked them for giving him the opportunity, but also made it clear that they were still going to die. The king and his entourage were puzzled and could not fully understand who El was, what he was going to do, and why he appeared right now. One of the king's loyal knights shouted at El to save his majesty. El was shocked to learn that he had just saved the king, while Leas took a more rational approach and told the knight not to act hastily, as El could be an enemy too. El looked at the king and realized that he was indeed King Ladolf of the Toan Kingdom. He turned his gaze to the enemy soldiers and said that he now fully understood the situation. Recognizing the enemy knights pursuing the king, he explained that he would not spare them for such an act. El raised his hand and formed a small ball of swirling mana and the words suffering and destruction. and this ball turned into a large portal behind him. Shortly after, Tana's hands could be seen reaching through the portal and practically tearing it apart. Al summoned his Golden Knight Golem right at the start of the battle, standing behind him and ready to fight for his master once again. The king and his duke were amazed by this spectacle. Although the king had heard rumors, seeing ELs in action, he found it hard to believe that they concerned the little boy. However, he felt an incredible amount of power coming from EL and wondered who this young mage was. EL raised his hand again and created a small ice crystal, and he fired into the ground to freeze the enemy soldiers who were blocking their escape and immobilize them. He stated that he could defeat them all with one blow and ordered Tanya to continue. However, he instructed her to spare some of the enemy knights so that they could be interrogated later to find out who was behind this attack. Tana confirmed her master's order, and while the king continued to be amazed and admired by El's power, trying to comprehend the extent of his magic and understand it, the enemy knights tried to break out of the ice and fight back, but they were unable to escape, let alone move properly. Tana followed Al's order and rushed forward. As she ran, she extended her hand, calling to her golden sword, which appeared in her hand. A sword enveloped in flames, just like it was on the Einhart family's battlefield. Tana, without wasting any time, swung her sword horizontally from right to left, quickly destroying enemy soldiers and creating a powerful recoil that killed them instantly. The king and his duke were once again overwhelmed by the overwhelming power of EL and his golem. Trying to understand what happened in that split second, Al thanked Tana, his golden golem, and praised her for her excellent work, to which Tana bowed to him and expressed her gratitude. The king realized that it must be the chief. There were rumors of a top mage in the Toan kingdom, which was currently only at the 6th level of magic. But if the king could defeat EL, his kingdom would finally have a 7th level mage. EL approached the king and asked if he was wounded. He introduced himself to the king by his name. The king thanked him for his help, clearly relieved, and EL explained that it was nothing and that he had only taken care of a few bad guys. Meanwhile, the king's loyal guards were busy arresting the remaining traitors. The king was amazed that EL not only saved his life, but also had the foresight to think further. He invited EL to dine with him and emphasized that simple verbal gratitude would not be enough in the circumstances. EL played along, pretending to consider the invitation, but eventually accepted it. And this made the king very happy and gave him a radiant expression on his face. The king explained that he would inform his mage of the invitation and order him to deactivate the seal preventing the invasion of teleportation magic so that El could refuse the bite within a day. El thanked him for this and then apologized, stating that he had to leave as he created a magic circle beneath himself and prepared for teleportation magic. However, as he teleported away, leaving the king alone on a rock in the forest, he added that he looked forward to seeing them tomorrow. Duke Leus then approached his king and expressed his relief that everything had turned out so well. He believed that the mage and golem knight who saved them were definitely involved in the incident in Einhart, and also hoped that they could help with the monster problem they were currently facing. The king turned around and asked his friend if he also believed that EL would be able to reach the 8th level of magic, still feeling very joyful, except for the fact that they almost died. When El told his family about his little adventure, they were amazed that he had just met the king. He explained that he had saved the king from an ambush in the forest and had received an invitation to the royal palace. His mother could hardly believe that everything had gone so well, but she was happy that her son would meet the king. She asked Al how she could get his support and wanted to hear his plan. Although Serena and Kana begged him to reveal the plan to them, El remained steadfast, explaining that he would share it with them later. Suddenly, 2 men approached their table. One of them hugged Al's mother and flirted with his sisters, asking if they wanted to spend some time with them. One of the men began to lightly touch Serena, but then Al intervened and politely asked him with a smile to keep his hands away from the family. The man, who did not quite understand the situation, asked him who he was. Al became a little serious and repeated with a firmer grip that a man should leave his family alone. Subsequently, the man and his friend left the room they were in. Serena and Kana looked at their brother, who saved them like a knight in golden armor, and felt a little embarrassed. Their mother noticed this and had to suppress a grin. She knew that both her girls were a little scared, and that EL was behaving like a real gentleman at that moment. EL himself was unaware of the situation, muttered something to himself, and then said that they both should be strong enough to handle the situation on their own. This completely ruined the mood of the women at the table, and EL's mother just shook her head. The next morning, which was as sunny as almost always, El said goodbye to his family as he needed to prepare to meet the king. His sisters and mother told him to be careful and that they looked forward to seeing him later. Then EL activated his teleportation magic, and in seconds he arrived at the king's great estate. In the room where teleportation magic could bring someone, there sat a man who was annoyed that he had to open the seals that protected the manor from people entering with teleportation magic. He wondered what important person would come that he had to do such a tedious task. Out of boredom, he sat in a chair, propping his face up with one hand and crossing his legs, wondering how long it would take for the guests to arrive. However, soon after he noticed movement in the center of the room, he quickly jumped up and realized that it was the mana of someone at the 7th level of magic. He was amazed to see someone so powerful right away. El appeared and landed successfully at the estate of his new king. The man who was waiting for El and immediately accepted him asked if he was the one who saved their king's life. El turned around and confirmed this, nodding his head, to which the man approached him, hugged him with tears in his eyes, and said that finally a 7th-rank mage would appear in the kingdom again. He was glad that he would no longer feel so burdened. Al didn't understand the situation and wondered who this old man was and what was going on here. Al became embarrassed, cleared his throat, and made it clear that he did not quite understand the situation he found himself in and felt somewhat uncomfortable. The old man came back to reality, realizing that he had become obsessive and allowed his emotions to take over. He immediately let go of Al, rubbed the back of his head with one hand, and apologized for his intrusive behavior. He told Al that he had never seen such a young 7th-class mage, and he made it clear to Al that he was fascinated by what he had already accomplished at such a young age. Al felt visibly uncomfortable being praised like that, and wondered what the hell was going on with the older man, and why he was praising so much. In an awkward situation, Al looked around the old man's room and found stacks of books scattered haphazardly across the floor, open and scattered haphazardly. Looking at the books more closely, he realized that they were books about magic. He had to remember how, as a child, he swallowed every magic book. It took a while, but then the old man apologized again for his rude behavior, and he mentioned that His Majesty the King was already waiting for El, and he would like to bring him to him. Al's eyes sparkled with delight at the fact that there was another person besides him who was passionate about magic. When El went with the old man to visit the king, he demonstrated some of his magic by channeling hot blue mana flames into his hand. The older man was beside himself when he saw Al's demonstration. He couldn't believe that someone so young could channel powerful magic into his hand without any preparation or casting of a spell. He told Al that he was on a completely different level than other 7th-grade magi. As they walked through the corridors of the royal castle, the old man pondered how this was possible and came up with many wild theories that made Al smile. As they walked down the hallway, Al smiled more and more. He enjoyed talking to the older man, and he had a lot of fun having this conversation, because the older man's passion was the same as Al's for researching and studying magic. Suddenly, Al's eyes widened, and he looked out of one of the palace windows and looked out at the harbor. There was a beautiful view of the city. The water was roaring. The waves were breaking on the harbor. The sun was shining, and there was a peaceful atmosphere over the harbor. El could see more clearly that this land was rich in food. The dungeons were full of resources and treasures. While El looked out the window, contemplating the advantages of the Tone Kingdom and feeling the heat of this place, the older man thought again, which aroused Al's interest. To stop his thoughts, Al handed the old man a small piece of paper with a magical theory that he had come up with and written down on paper. Walking through the corridors of the castle, he explained to the old man that there were many similarities between the fields of magic and calculations. The older man took the piece of paper from Al eagerly and energetically, clearly excited. He looked at the theory and was surprised that such a method even existed. Al explained that he had not originally intended to make this theory public, but he wanted to show it to the older man because he liked him. However, Al also made it clear by placing his index finger to his mouth that he was to keep this theory a secret. While Al and the older man took their time and walked leisurely towards the king, he waited alone in the large room at the table. He supported his face with one hand and tapped the table impatiently with the other. A voice behind the door informed the king that his guest, Al, had arrived and was waiting for permission to enter, and the king immediately ordered him to be let in. And Dessen opened the door, letting Al into the room, and he very politely apologized for being late. The king stood up joyfully and was about to greet Al, and Dessen stood before El and told the king that El was a magician who would change the course of history. The king ordered Dessen to calm down, and then he asked Dessen to leave him and Al alone. Al was a little confused as to why the king wanted to speak with him alone, and now he realized that he had not seen any knights on the way to this room, and there was no knight in this room either. El thanked him for having conducted him so well to the king and for the pleasant conversations on the way here. In conclusion, Dessen, with a big request and a smile on his face, asked them to meet again, as he wanted to learn more about Al's discoveries in magic. He said goodbye and closed the door behind him. The king found his wizard's behavior somewhat disconcerting and shook his head slightly and shamefacedly when they were left alone in the room. El knelt down, bowed, and greeted the king with the utmost respect and utmost courtesy. However, before El could express his gratitude from the depths of his heart, the king touched El on the shoulder and addressed him as Sir before his name. At this time, the king also knelt before Al. He told him to please stand up and clarified that it was he who should express his gratitude. Having expressed his gratitude, the king clapped his hands several times. And at this time, the servants and maids brought delicious food into the room. The king apologized for his rudeness, but explained that the food would be served immediately. The king then said that El should feel at ease and they would be able to talk freely. Al smiled, realizing that King Lydolf was a very considerate man, even in the most insignificant things. While they were eating, Lydolf subsequently asked Al if he would like some alcohol, and explained that he had specially prepared something from the most popular alcohol in his kingdom. Al naturally agreed and handed the glass to the king, and then thanked him. This included treating the king with great respect and speaking his mind freely without much hesitation. And so El told the king straight to his face that he thought he wanted him to build a magic tower on this land. At first, King Lydolf was astonished, and some shock appeared on his face. However, soon the shocked expression on his face turned serious, and he confirmed Al's assumption. However, the king explained that the tower was not only intended to consolidate his power, but also to protect against monsters and their annual attacks, during which thousands, up to 10,000 civilians, die. He explained that the first and second princes had joined forces and together had won over half the kingdom to their side. King Lydolf added that he would not be surprised if an internal conflict arose in his kingdom at any moment. Lydolf also said that he wanted to have a good kingdom where his subjects could live in peace and under protection. In addition, Lydolf explained to Al that the magic tower could help prevent future wars with other countries. Finally, Lydolf also expressed his desire for the third prince to become king, considering him a very warm and kind-hearted man. So Lydolf begged El to settle in his kingdom, emphasizing that his subjects deserved this happiness. Al was surprised and amazed at how seriously the king took this. A slight smile appeared on Al's face. He was happy that he had made the right choice, and that the king on whose land he wanted to settle turned out to be such a kind-hearted man. King Lydolf explained that he agreed with Al and would do his best to help the kingdom of Toland, and thanked Al for this, and said that he would also do his best to support him in creating the magic tower. However, Al also stated that he had some conditions that needed to be met in order for him to help, and one of them was that he needed 3 years to make the necessary preparations. Hearing this, Lydolf was surprised that it would take 3 years, and then added that they did not have much time, and that Count Luce's territory, one of the destroyed territories, would not last another 3 years. Al's expression changed, and he seemed a little surprised when the smile that had appeared on his lips disappeared. King Lydolf further explained that they had enjoyed years of peace thanks to a great wizard, but recently some humans had kidnapped the wizard, and since then monsters had been steadily advancing into the Count's territory, causing increasing casualties among the civilian population. Al's eyes suddenly widened when he heard that someone had kidnapped a wizard and immediately thought that it might be the work of the Marquise. King Lydolf went on to say that at present, Sister and Luce were managing affairs as skillfully as the former count. He explained that she was the daughter of a former count and a genius in fencing and matters of territorial administration. But with a heavy heart, Lydolf also said that the monsters could completely destroy this area if they were not stopped, and that would mean the end of the Luce family. Unfortunately, Al had to inform the king that he would have to stick to 3 years because he needed that time to build the magic tower. However, as he plunged his knife into a juicy, well-cooked steak, he explained to the king with a smile that he would take care of everything in Manticore Gorge. Lydolf reacted to Al's words with disbelief, asking if he meant Manticore Gorge, the land of death, and if the whole problem could really be dealt with there. Al explained that it was possible and that it would take him 3 years to sort out the affairs in Manticore Gorge, with Al also asking how many raids there were each year. Lydolf explained to him that in total, his kingdom was raided by 10,000 people every year, and that there must be about 15,000 manticores living in the gorge. Al folded his hands in front of his face and said that 15,000 manticores was a very large number that required time and attention. In disbelief, King Lydolf, wide-eyed, asked Al if it was really possible to free and save his kingdom from Manticore Gorge and its monsters. Al told him that he must have forgotten that he was a 7th-level mage. In addition, El explained to the king with a smile on his face that he also had a trump card, the Night Golem. Surprised, King Lydolf remembered that El was right. Due to Al's young age, He almost forgot that he was a 7th level mage, and he remembered that he was also accompanied by a night golem. When he looked at Al's face again and saw the confidence and determination in his eyes, he knew that nothing was impossible for this young man. Lidolf once again begged El to restore peace to the kingdom. Al replied that he looked to the future with joyful anticipation and was very glad to settle here. Then he stood up and apologized. King Lidolf asked Al if he was going to leave now. Al confirmed this with a smile on his face and said that now he knew what he needed to do. Then he thanked the king for the invitation and headed for the door. Before he could leave, King Lidolf told him that he could visit him at any time and that he could come whenever it suited him. Manticore Gorge was a canyon between two mountains with a small blue river flowing through it. There were approximately 15,000 manticores living in this forest and gorge. Manticores were large, lion-like predatory cats with wings on their backs and a scorpion-like tail that generally had few enemies. These specimens had particularly sharp and large teeth and were monstrously strong. This was the king of the manticores, who could be recognized by the red gem on his forehead, which gave him power over all other manticores. The strength of this manticore king was comparable to that of 100 normal manticores, and even stronger than 100 at the expert level. It was perfectly normal that during a manticore attack, villages would simply disappear as if they had never existed. And right now, one of the villages is about to suffer the same fate. This village was the small village of Ken, and it lay on the right side between two mountains in a forest crossed by a river, and to enter the village one had to cross a small narrow bridge. This bridge was currently under attack by two manticores, and the villagers were desperately trying to defend themselves and fight them off. One of the villagers asked his comrade how they could stop two manticores at the same time, and the soldiers' faces showed despair. However, another soldier shouted to his comrades that they were not to let the manticores into the village under any circumstances. He stomped his right foot on the ground, causing a large shockwave, and confidently told his comrades that anyone who could and wanted to fight was welcome to join him in battle. His comrades then gained new courage and expected nothing else from their captain, and they had to admit that their captain was a very talented swordsman. In the middle of the bridge, the captain was simply fighting a slowly approaching manticore. Suddenly, the manticore showed its teeth to the brave warriors. Captain Mir was not impressed, jumped into the air and immediately attacked the manticores with his weapon. With all his might, he struck the manor in the forehead with his weapon, headbutting it. Unfazed by his own direct hit, the captain simply immediately ordered his men to attack the manticore before it could recover. All the soldiers on the bridge drew their bows and prepared to storm. Without wasting any time, they fired arrows at the manticore, which had just been paralyzed by the captain, hitting it all over its body. Standing before the corpse of the estate, the captain was sure that even such a monster would not have withstood such an attack. Then he wanted to make sure he defeated the manticore and delivered the finishing blow. He attacked the second manticore's head with his spear, causing it to scream and fall to the ground. Captain Mir was confident that the first wave of attacks on the estate was already behind him. Captain Mir was even more surprised when he saw that there was another manticore hiding behind the first two. The manticore, roaring with its mouth open and rushing towards him with two sharp horns, was about to attack. The captain only realized that the manticores would come one after another. He turned to his comrades and soldiers, warning them that another manticore had arrived and they would have to repel the attack. However, looking at the detachment, he noticed that his soldiers were clearly exhausted and needed a break. Captain Mir was a little puzzled, as he had never seen such a large manticore walking alone in his life, and he thought that it would probably be too difficult to repel the attack using only villagers as soldiers. However, he did not give up and gripped his weapon tighter, and realized that despite the disadvantageous position, they would have to repel the attack. He then assumed a fighting stance and waited for the manticore to approach. He ran towards her with fire in his mouth. Both opponents were preparing for the first blow, just the captain with a spear and the manticore with fire in its mouth. The manticore was the first to fire a fireball at the captain. After this, Captain Mir rushed towards the manticore. When the two attacks collided, there was a loud explosion. The villagers held their hands in front of them to deflect the huge shockwave. As the fire and smoke slowly cleared, Captain Mir's silhouette could be seen. He leaned on his weapon and dropped to his knees, completely out of breath. As his gaze fell on the manticore in front of them, he wondered how anyone could have come out of such an attack unscathed. As he did so, he looked straight into the dark red eyes of a large predatory cat. Completely exhausted, he wondered if this was the end for him. However, with one blow, the manticore was divided into 4 parts. As a result, the manticore fell to the ground right in front of the captain. Captain Mir and the villagers were amazed, wondering who could easily defeat such a beast. While the unbelievers were looking at the corpse of the manticore, a man in a red robe and red gloves emerged from the water. She stood majestically before Captain Mir and the villagers, who looked at her carefully and were surprised that their savior was a girl who, at first glance, did not even reach 20 years of age. El, who was following Kana, congratulated her on a job well done and said that in the future they would definitely need to find a new master. These words of praise were too much for Kane, and he blushed in embarrassment. After Kana sorted out her thoughts and considered her brother's words of praise, El turned to Captain Mira and the villagers, greeting them. They were still amazed and could not yet comprehend what was happening right before their eyes. El explained to them that they had not come to harm them, but rather introduced himself as a wizard who wanted to provide them all with a pleasant life and would soon rule the land. However, this news shocked Captain Mirror, who then, trembling, clutched his weapon and asked what Al meant by this. Completely frightened, he straightened up, aimed his gun at Al and asked why this land was soon to be his. Kaina also reached for her weapon and asked how he dared point his sword at her brother. She channeled all of her red aura, expressing her anger at this action. She asked Captain Mirror how he could be so rude to Al and yelled at him. Mirror was quite surprised, swallowed, and had to look at the impressive, incredibly dense aura that unfolded before him. Suddenly, Al shouted from behind Kane for her to stop, and he touched her shoulder to pull her out of her anger and fury. Al explained to her that they were outsiders, and that from their point of view, such a reaction from the villagers was completely normal. After this, Al turned to the villagers and said that he had probably reported it incorrectly. He explained to the villagers that he planned to build his magic tower here, driving away all the manticores from the area. The villagers on the bridge whispered to each other and could not believe what they were hearing. Captain Mirror did not hesitate to ask Al directly what he planned to do with them. Al immediately realized that the man in front of him must be the leader of this village, and he explained to Captain Mirror that they should live as they did. This surprised Captain Mirror, and he opened his eyes wide, clearly surprised by the words coming out of Al's mouth. El then explained to Captain Mirror and the villagers that he planned to rid the entire land around them of manticores. This should mean that their village can continue to expand and use more land without the risk of attack. Captain Mirror couldn't believe what he was hearing and his eyes widened, his mouth hanging open as he needed to first understand what El had just said. The rest of the villagers on the bridge were also stunned, trying to comprehend what they had heard from Al. Suddenly, another massive paw stomped on the ground, and another manticore became visible behind Al. Al immediately realized this and quickly turned around. He formed a magic circle beneath himself and called on the residents to remain calm. Behind him, another portal to another dimension opened, from which 3 large iron golems emerged. They stood imposingly behind Al, who became serious and ordered his golems to take care of the villagers' problem. A latch in one of the golems' helmets opened, and Al realized that the command had been accepted immediately. The iron golem rushed towards the manticore, tiny in comparison, and raising his right hand, he crushed the small creature. Captain Mirror was speechless as he watched El deal with the manticore. The iron golem carried out Al's command, kneeling before its master and awaiting further instructions. Smiling, Al turned to the captain and asked if he would trust him now. Captain Mirror's surprised expression changed, and he knew that their safety was guaranteed with such golems around them. Moreover, he saw El as an extremely powerful mage and believed that he could make Manticore Gorge a place where people could live again. He put his hand to his chest and apologized to Al. Al extended his hand to Captain Mirror and said that his behavior only proved that he was a good leader and that there was no shame in expecting something suspicious when first meeting someone. Captain Mirror thanked him for his kind words and shook his hand. However, Captain Mirror became serious again and said that they needed to quickly move to the other end of the small village to protect themselves from the other manticores. Smiling, Al assured him that there was no need to worry and that his fears were unfounded. While El and Kana took care of that side, El's mother and his other sister Serena, with El's golden golem Tana, took care of the manticore on the other side of the village. Mother Ela and Serna were repeatedly amazed by Tana's strength, and their eyes widened when they witnessed the spectacle of Tana's victory over the manticore. At the end of the battle, Tana was basking in the sun. El asked Captain Mirror if he could gather representatives of the village to announce his plans. Several hours passed before our group and the villagers found themselves at the table. Looking around, Al was a little surprised, as he expected some old village leaders to arrive. But most of those who spoke on behalf of the village were young men, all with large, well-trained muscles. Upon closer inspection, Al realized that they all had the same aura. He wondered if there was a specific reason for this. After forming the first impression, El stood up and greeted everyone warmly and asked the villagers if they had all learned the same sword technique, citing the nearly identical aura and strength that could not be obtained through regular training by the ordinary villagers. The villagers and Captain Mirror were immediately stunned by Al's speech. Al also wondered what such talented people were doing in such a place. Captain Mare thought for a moment and looked at the ground, then looked back at Al and explained that he hadn't really expected anything different from him. He also complimented El's sharp eyes and explained that they were actually Baron Jaimier's knights, the same Baron Jaimier famous for his swordsmanship who became a swordmaster at the age of 30. Captain Mare continued, clearly upset and saddened, his head down. As the struggle for the crown intensified, many attempts were made to win the Baron over to their side. Al's mother looked at the worried village leader with motherly love, and she could see in his eyes that this was not an easy topic for him, and the pain was still deep. Captain Mare went on to explain that despite all attempts to win the Baron over to his side, they had failed, as he had rejected all offers. With tears in his eyes, Captain Mare said that at the time they were knights on probation, and the Baron told them to run and survive, and the rest of the villagers at the table also had tears in their eyes. Al's mother continued to listen to this story, and she became even sadder when she witnessed the hard fate of the soldiers. El, on the contrary, listened attentively to this story, but was not as deeply moved as his mother. He knew exactly how the soldiers must have felt, but he didn't understand why they didn't just go to another country with their skills, since as knights, they should have been able to get a knighthood and not put their family in such a dangerous situation. However, as Al thought about it, he realized that he would have to reconsider his thoughts, and he realized that each person had their own ideals, and that the circumstances in which these people lived were different from his own. He looked at his hands and realized that he first needed to resolve their situation to understand their way of thinking and differences. He looked at the representatives again and explained to them that the monsters were easy for him to deal with, and that this was not the main problem. He also looked at his sisters and then back at Captain Mare as he continued to explain his plans. He explained that his first goal was to approach the Manticore leader. This greatly surprised the villagers, who could not believe what they had just heard. Captain Mare was also amazed by Al's plan and asked him if it was even possible to defeat the Manticore King. El, full of confidence, spoke to the villagers and assured them that he would keep his word and show them how to defeat such a beast. The beast is twice the size of the normal version, with a red gem on its forehead, wings, and a scorpion tail. Initially, Al settled his affairs with the villagers. He immediately moved on to the next step, happily heading to a place he hadn't been to in a long time. Al stood exactly where he had once looked out over the city with his mother, and remembered that this was where his journey had once begun. Dibble's shop was located in the kingdom of Banzar, and it looked unchanged, the same as it was when El left the kingdom. Dibble sat at the table and signed important documents brought to him by the secretary. One after another, he signed and processed them, and then he would hand it back to his secretary to do the rest. Ever since he received the right to sell magic stones, the fame of his small shop has grown rapidly. He thought of Al as an important client and business partner, and he also remembered watching Al grow up and witnessing all of his development. He also remembered reading in the newspaper recently that the residence of the esteemed Marquis Einhart had exploded. This immediately made him wonder if Al had something to do with it. His surprise was obvious when he read the article as before El left the kingdom. He asked Dibble about Marquis Einhart. Dibble hoped that the information he gave to Al didn't lead him to destroy the house. Lost in thoughts about El, Secretary Dibble had to call out his name several times, each time getting louder, until he came back to reality. Totally confused, he asked his secretary how long she had been standing there. She replied that she had been calling his name for a long time. Then she informed him that one of the important clients he had just spoken of had suddenly appeared at his door. Dibble was extremely surprised and repeated whether he had understood correctly what his secretary had just said. She confirmed this and escorted the high-ranking client to Dibble's premises. Al mentioned that it had been a long time since they last saw each other, with an ecstatic expression and a smile on his face. Dibble couldn't get over his surprise, as he had just thought about El. Al, without wasting any time, directly stated his purpose, which was to discuss several issues with Dibble. However, Dibble did not respond to Al's words. Instead, he rushed towards him, shaking him and asking if he was safe and if he had any injuries. He naturally inquired about Al's brothers and sisters and his mother to make sure they were okay. El, still in Dibble's arms, was a little surprised but eventually calmed him down. Al thanked him for his concern and explained that everything was fine and said with a smile that it was nice to have someone take care of him. Dibble released Al, adjusted the glasses hanging on a chain around his neck, and apologized for letting his emotions get out of control. He explained that he reacted that way because he had known Al since he was 7 years old, and it meant a lot to him, and pointed to a seat and asked Al to sit down. He cleared his throat, sat down opposite Al, and asked him why he had come and what needed to be discussed. Al wanted to be honest from the start and told him that he planned to build a magic tower. This surprised Dibble again, and thanks to Al's plans, he realized that the news he read in the newspaper could link the explosion to Al. Al confirmed this and mentioned that, although it may be hard to believe, he is now a 7th level mage. This news struck Deeble like lightning, and he could not stop being surprised. With wide eyes, he told Al that ever since he first saw him as a young boy, he had felt that he was someone very important and special. Deeble then asked Al where he planned to build the magic tower. Al told him that he planned to build it in Manticore Gorge, and Al continued to smile and answer the surprised Deeble that this was exactly what he meant, and that Deeble had understood everything correctly. In any other country, anyone who plans to build a magic tower will be welcomed with open arms. This would mean that Al had the freedom to choose any suitable place to settle. Thus, Deeble found it illogical that Al decided to build a magic tower in the land of monsters. But deep down, Deeble knew that he should not doubt Al's decision and told him that he agreed and thought it was a good idea. This surprised Al, who was a little confused, stating that he had not explained everything yet and wondered why he had already received approval from Deeble. Sitting across from him, Deeble said that everything Al did was new and exciting and wanted to know what Al's next plan was. Al smiled at Deeble's trust and then began to explain his next plans. As Deeble suspected, Al's plans were indeed exciting. He was confident that if successful, the business would become one of the best on the entire continent. Deeble also mentioned that he wanted to start recruiting the people needed to build the magic tower and asked Al when would be the best time to prepare them. Al told him that the sooner he found people, the better. But with a mixed expression on his face, he also asked if it would be difficult to find such people. Deeble answered honestly, also with a mixed expression on his face, that it might be quite difficult to find people willing to work on the magic tower, especially in the area where the Manticore King resided. Hearing this, the mixed feelings disappeared from Al's face, and he said with confidence that this problem would no longer be a problem in Manticore Gorge. There was a small river with crystal clear water, into which waterfalls flowed. Almost no one dared to enter this small, shaded place in the gorge, as it was the territory of the King of Manticore, who slumbered on the banks of the river. However, a wondrous and terrifying unknown energy awakened the Manticore King from his sleep, and he yawned, revealing his sharp and pointed teeth. He stretched and let out a terrifying growl as his first reaction, indicating to all the creatures in his vicinity what a foul mood he was in due to this disturbance. As the Manticore King rose, he reached an impressive height of 6 meters, surrounded by a dark aura. His eyes glowed at least as red as the jewel on his forehead, and his combat level surpassed that of a swordmaster. After taking a few minutes to wake up and stretch, he began to run as fast as he could towards the source of the unknown energy with a menacing expression on his face. Usually, the kings of the estate had several subjects with them to protect and watch over their territory. However, this time King Manticore was different. He had great confidence in his powers, believing that nothing and no one could kill him. That was why he was so eager to find the mysterious energy that troubled his senses and made him doubt his own powers. At full speed, the big cat ran faster, jumping over obstacles ready to confront his opponent. And finally, he reached the place of mysterious energy and showed his sharp teeth. When he arrived at the place of mysterious energy, upon arrival he saw 3 magical iron golems controlled by L. One stood in front, the other 2 a step behind. To demonstrate his power, the Manticore King roared loudly in response again. Al appeared on the shoulder of one of the golems, claiming that the king had fallen into his trap. This came as no surprise to Al, as he had known from the start that the king was nothing more than a monster. To have so many other manticores under your command, you have to be a real monster. Al also felt a thick dark aura coming from the king. It was so intense that even Al had to protect himself and realize the potential danger of the situation. However, despite the inherent danger, Al's adventurous spirit took over again, and he wanted to find out the origin of this dark aura. Standing up from his seated position, Al looked at his opponent, ready to begin revealing the source of the dark aura. However, the big cat, not wanting to take a non-combat position, hissed in response, preparing to defend himself and his territory. Without a word, one of the large iron golems on Elle's side rushed towards the manticore to teach her some manners. He swung his right hand to deliver a powerful blow to the cat. However, before the blow could land, the manticore defended itself with its scorpion-like tail, deflecting the attack. This even surprised Al, who had to admit the incredibly quick reaction of the king of Manticore. Not only were the reflexes fast, Iron Tail managed to seriously damage the iron golem's armor, incapacitating it. Realizing the situation, Al immediately sent 2 other golems together to attack the Manticore King. This time, one of the golems even managed to land a blow to the Manticore's face. However, this seemed to have little effect on the Manticore, as it easily defended itself from the attack with its iron skin. Al realized that the attacks were not strong enough to penetrate this iron skin. The manticore bit through the iron golem's armor and defeated the second one, biting off one of the golem's arms. This golem fell to the ground, making it clear that Al's opponent would not be easy. Manticore was a true king who often defended his territory and proved his position. Even though 2 of the 3 iron golems had already been defeated, the third golem continued to move forward, attempting to attack the manticore from behind. However, the manticore noticed this sneak attack, and with a deft movement of his hind legs, he repelled this attack. He punched the last 3 iron golems in the face, defeating them as well, leaving them lying on the ground with broken armor. Seen from above, the manticore, surrounded by 3 iron golem corpses, stood firmly on the battlefield, confirming its position as the ruler of the territory. To prove his strength to El, he roared again, creating a furious shockwave and screaming at him. Elu had to admit that this manticore king was much stronger than he initially thought. He looked at his golems and realized that their regeneration rate was too slow, which led him to the conclusion that the manticore king's attacks were quite powerful. Realizing his situation, El intervened and intended to challenge Tana, his golden golem, to battle. However, before it could be summoned, the manticore took advantage of the opportunity and attacked with one of its front claws. Al was shocked that he had miscalculated the situation and was struck by a powerful blow from the king, sending him helplessly back. Manticore's blow sent El flying through the forest and landing on the ground. The manticore wasted no time in bending over Al. El began to dissolve on the spot. The manticore then looked up, sensing El's presence there. It took Al a moment to catch his breath, and he felt relieved that he had initially been fighting a phantom battle against the manticore king, allowing him to safely watch everything from above. Since his copy had no way to summon Tana, the original now performed this task. A magic circle unfolded behind Al, and a portal to another dimension appeared on the rock below him. Tana jumped out, ready to confront the manticore king. Al turned to Tanya, ordering her to enter the battle without a sword and use Plan B. Tana confirmed the command and prepared to meet the beast. She rushed forward, intending to strike like the first iron golem. However, unlike the iron golem, the manticore king dodged this time, avoiding the attacks. After successfully dodging, the manticore king leapt forward with his 2 front claws, attempting to attack Tana. However, Tanya managed to dodge the attack without being hit. She then took a different approach, trying to counterattack. Unfortunately, the manticore dodged her counterattack, causing her attack to miss again. Unfortunately, this left Tana at a disadvantage, with her back to the manticore king, but she managed to turn around at the last moment as the estate king was ready to attack again. Unlike the previous times where he relied on his physical superiority, the manticore king launched a different attack. He opened his mouth and released a powerful blast of dark aura in the form of a beam towards Tana, who tried to defend herself from the attack with her hands. Al was surprised that even Tanya had a hard time fighting against this manticore king. However, he also knew that his golden golem had not yet begun to fight seriously and signaled to Tanya that it was time to stop playing and start fighting seriously. After the manticore king's attack died down, Tana raised her right hand and began to accumulate a huge amount of fire aura in her fist. Of course, the manticore king did not want to allow this and quickly rushed towards his opponent. However, Tana had already gathered enough aura in her fist and delivered a powerful blow that hit straight at the large manticore king. The manticore king was thrown back into the air and landed on the ground from Tana's powerful blow. On the contrary, Tana stood before him unharmed, ready to finish the job. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tana jumped on the body of the manticore king, knelt down and intended to finish him off. However, when Al spoke up, saying that it was enough and that he wanted her to stop, both Tana and the Manor King looked at him in surprise. El stated that there was no reason to take the life of the manticore king. Even the big wild cat, surprised by this, sat down in front of Al and looked like a well-behaved kitten. This also surprised Al, who didn't know what was happening. After this battle, it pulled our protagonist back to the small village of Ken, which he had previously saved from 2 manticore captains. Mara could not believe what was unfolding before his eyes and was in awe. Meanwhile, King Manticore, still in his normal state and standing at 6 memoir tall, clung to his new master, demanding attention. Even after several minutes, Captain Mara could not believe what he saw and thought about the possible destruction if such a huge monster were to rampage here. However, Al assured him that he had the situation under control and suggested that Captain Mara see his new pet as nothing more than a giant cat. He offered Captain Mara a gentle pat, smiling broadly. But before he could think about it further, King Manticore licked Captain Mara's face, trying to show that he was no longer to be feared. After that, the Manticore King had a very peaceful expression on his face. Captain Mara asked Al what he planned to do with this monster now. Al explained to Merer once again that the Manticore King was at least as strong as a half-Grandmaster ranked knight, and had the ability to command other lower-level Manticores. He planned to use his new pet to make his life easier and command other Manticores, and informed the captain that he would now begin building a magical tower to make the land safer for him and the villagers, allowing them to live in peace and tranquility. 3 months had passed since the King of Manticore had disappeared from the Manticore Gorge, and the construction of the magic tower was in full swing, and so far the whole process was going relatively smoothly. A teleportation portal was created inside the magic tower, directly linking Deeble's shop with the magic tower. Thanks to the people Deeble hired, the expensive materials for the tower were quickly transported. While the diligent workers were building the tower, Al's mother and sisters helped with provisions. The outer facade of the magical tower soon began to slowly take shape. It was a large golden tower, unrivaled in its grandeur, reaching into the sky for several floors. From time to time, people would approach the great golden magic tower, look up incredulously, and wonder what this huge building was. Most were unsure of the nature of the structure, often referring to it as simply a large warehouse. However, now the decisive part of Al's plans began. In parallel with the construction of his magical tower, the first step was the capture and relocation of the lesser manticores, many of whom had disappeared on their own after the disappearance of their king. Scattering throughout the nearby forests, Al used his magic to capture the remaining smaller manticores and transport them to another dimension. Because it was a difficult task that would radically change the life of the country, many people were fascinated by the success of Al's plan, which brought him great happiness. Gradually, fewer and fewer manticores circled around the magical Tower of El, and the attacks of these dangerous wildcats dropped almost to zero. It became possible to build more houses in the immediate vicinity of the magic tower, and soon a large city with a population of 15,000 people peacefully arose around the magic tower. Al's mother and his sisters sat together at the table and discussed how, if they had not experienced it themselves, they would never have believed that this territory was previously inhabited by wild cats that terrified the local people. Serena and Al's mother talked about the city's prosperity. Kana noted that their plans were not fully realized, and Al agreed with his red-haired sister, stating that there was still much to be done before they were finished. Holding a cup of coffee, Serena asked what their next plan was. Al, who was also drinking coffee and waiting for it to cool down a bit, explained to his family that future plans would cost a lot of money, and their top priority should be raising funds to continue building his magical tower. Over a cup of coffee, he also told his family that he was about to meet a very important person. This news surprised Serena and Kana, and they trembled, wondering who their brother could have meant by the important person. Serena noted that she had never seen her brother like this before and wondered who they were visiting. Meanwhile, Al's mother was also sitting at the table drinking coffee. She was pleased that peace had come to her family, allowing them to now enjoy life. The sea brought small waves to the beach from time to time, splashing onto the beautiful golden sandy shore. Al was walking along the beach with his family, declaring that he needed to introduce them to someone important, and his sister Serena said that she couldn't wait to meet the person who was so important to him. Only their mother had a slight smile on her face, because she was the only one who understood what their 2 daughters, as well as their only son, were feeling and what their words really meant. Serena and Kana, shocked, turned to their mother and asked why she was laughing, and Al's mother only apologized for her laughter and let the situation go. The family walked along the beach together, repeatedly wondering where this important person could be, but there was nothing else to be seen on the entire beach except for some sparse seaweed and a few barrels of seafood. Al turned around and asked his family if it was incredible, explaining that he thought this beach was especially cool. He specified that this was the western part of the Tone Kingdom, famous for its seafood. As Al explained to his family that there were little to no mages in the area, making it a very poor area, he suddenly remembered that he forgot to tell them who the area actually belonged to. However, before he could say the name, the earth suddenly shook and a strong tremor spread. The family members' eyes turned to the source of the tremors, wondering what could have caused such a noise. Behind some trees, they saw a large black cloud rising from the middle of the forest and realized that this was the source of the tremors. There was a large wall in the middle of the forest, and several archers were trying to prevent the orcs from breaking through the wall. They drew their bows and aimed at the attacking big green pigs. Before the orcs could jump to the wall, the guards fired arrows. However, the large green orcs deflected the arrows, and then they pulled out their weapons and began the attack. One of the orcs jumped straight onto the wall and, holding onto it, climbed up. There were only a few inches left to stop the orc from reaching the wall. The commander of the guard realized this and ordered his soldiers to pour oil on the place. As a result, the orc lost his grip and fell to the ground. Unfortunately, his soldiers had to inform him that they had already used up all their oil and there was none left. Suddenly, a voice was heard saying that she would take care of it, which shocked the commander. When he looked to the right, a man in a slightly yellow cloak appeared, reminiscent of a last-minute savior. It was Rin who had power over this territory. Rin had light pink hair, red eyes. She wore a blue top, riding pants and boots, and a sword was hanging from her belt on the left side. She spoke confidently to her soldiers, ordering them to cover her. She immediately jumped off the wall, aiming at the orc that was hanging on the wall. In mid-air, Rin drew her sword and killed the orc as if he was nothing. Continuing to fall from the wall, she set her sights on her next target, and he asked the other orc if he was upset that she had defeated his comrade earlier. Rin gripped the sword tighter, enveloping it in aura, then swung the sword, and the second orc fell just like the first, without having time to do anything. Taking a brief moment to catch her breath below, she apologized to her defeated opponents for her victory and explained to them that losing was not one of her hobbies. The soldiers holding the bridge cheered for their leader, who had successfully defeated the two attackers. Suddenly, Rin noticed something behind her and turned around in shock. She spotted another orc making his way towards the wall. This orc managed to reach the top and was about to hit one of the soldiers with a club. The soldier was so shocked by the orc that he was paralyzed and unable to move in the face of certain death. As the orc saw his chance and prepared to destroy the soldier, a fireball flew from behind. The orc began to burn from the fireball and nothing could save him at that moment. Rin looked up and realized that this fireball seemed to be a sign of magic and wondered where it came from. Just like before, Al suddenly appeared and apologized for possibly scaring her, still holding the remnants of the fireball magic in his palm. Smiling, he mentioned that he had found exactly the person he had been looking for from the very beginning. Rin didn't understand what this guy was talking about. His sisters and mother were busy running through the dense forest. Serena walked ahead, wondering where the hell her brother was, followed by Kana and their mother, amazed that their son could run through this dense forest like it was nothing. Eventually, Serena managed to make her way through the dense forest and came out into a clearing with her sister and mother. She was overjoyed to finally get out of the forest thicket. Their gazes shifted to Elle, and they became somewhat alarmed. Al just told Rin that he wanted to talk to her, while his sisters also looked at Rin. Both Serna and Kana wondered, seeing the shocked expression on their mother's face, if this beautiful woman was the one their brother had in mind as the important person. Rin pointed her sword at Elle, asking what he meant by wanting to talk and reminding him that this was their first meeting. She also warned Al not to make any wrong moves. Unperturbed and unaffected, Al admitted he had probably made a mistake and explained that he was just glad to finally see her in person. He then introduced himself with a smile, telling Rin that he was a mage from the Tone Kingdom and that he had come today to discuss something with them. However, Rin didn't smile and asked Elle why she should believe him, showing a very hostile expression. In response, Elle released his magic, creating a vortex of his magic towards Rin. After sensing Elle's mana, Rin had to admit that the mana she felt was on a completely different level, and that this power could not come from a normal mage. Realizing that Elle was most likely not lying and telling the truth, she sheathed her sword. She put her hand on her chest, apologized to Al, explaining that she had been a bit rude, but only wanted to protect her territory, and then asked for forgiveness. After this, Rin suggested continuing the conversation elsewhere and invited Elle, Serena, Kane, and their mother to her residence. The residence was located on a cliff, offering an impressive view of the mirror blue sea. Upon arriving at the residence, Rin treated the guests to tea while apologizing for the fact that it was not a particularly expensive tea. The main characters were not upset because the tea was delicious. Al's mother even complimented the aroma of the tea, expressing surprise at how good it was. However, Rin apologized again for not being able to offer her guests more comfort. Unlike his mother, Al was more skeptical. He admitted that the tea was good, but he also knew that it could be easily bought and that there was nothing special about the castle. Even Rin's clothes were very simple. Al realized that the financial situation of the area was worse than he had originally thought. Rin asked her guests directly why they came to see her today. Elle responded and explained that this territory, ruled by Count Luz, was under attack not only by orcs as mentioned earlier, but also by manticores. However, he assured her that she no longer had to worry about that. Surprised, Rin asked Elle if he would help her, to which Elle replied that they no longer needed help. This puzzled Rin, who wondered why they no longer needed help against such monsters. Al explained that he had already taken care of most of the manticores himself, and that he had built a magical tower in the city in the former Manticore Gorge, preventing any further attacks on the area. This news shocked Rin, who was clearly shocked and speechless. Even a few seconds later, she remained silent, sitting in a state of shock. A few seconds later, Rin apologized for the brief interruption and ended the conversation, although still somewhat skeptical. But she had to admit that she had been seeing fewer manticores than usual lately, so she was more inclined to believe L. Al replied that soon all the normal manticores would slowly disappear. Rin's eyes filled with tears, and she thanked L, saying it was some of the best news she had heard in years. She could hardly find words of gratitude, let alone a way to express her appreciation. Al was shocked by the gratitude he received, although he had not yet moved on to the main topic of his conversation. He thought about what he really wanted to tell her, but felt relieved that he could help again, wanting to see how Rin would react when he told her about his plans to strengthen her family throughout the kingdom. When Al's mother spoke, she explained that Al's father was from the Luce family, and that they were there mainly because Al seemed very concerned about belonging to that family. She went on to explain that Al's father was Rian Luce, making the two likely cousins. These revelations shocked Rin. Rin confirmed that Rian Luce was indeed part of her family. She explained that Ryan had been protecting the area from monsters until the day he was kidnapped and reported missing. Rin was shocked by the news again, and it took her a while to realize that Ryan had a son. Pleased that Rin took the news well, El expressed his belief that having a father made them a family, and he also explained that when someone in his family was going through hard times, he believed that they should help each other. Serena, Kana, and Al's mother listened attentively to Al's warm and heartfelt words. As the sea waves crashed against the rocks and the sound of the sea echoed through the castle walls, El assured Rin that with his help, she could continue to protect the people in her territory from further harm. Tears began to flow down Rin's cheeks again, and she apologized for showing her vulnerable side. What's encouraging is that Al's mother said she thought Rin was an extremely cool person, even though she was crying at the time. However, Rin disagreed, insisting that she be addressed by her first name, as people usually addressed her by her title out of politeness. El's mother, being especially sensitive, happily accepted the offer and introduced herself by the name of Silfer. Serena, Kana, and El also introduced themselves, again with happy expressions on their faces, glad that their family member turned out to be a good person. As a token of gratitude, El asked if he could invite the family to a very famous place in the territory of Luz, and then asked if they liked the sea. The three girls excitedly confirmed that they had heard correctly and were looking forward to their trip to the sea. Rin winked at the three women, noting that the weather outside was fine and they could take a short excursion. The water was, as always, crystal clear, and light waves rolled up and down the shore. And walking along the beach, Al's mother, Serena, and Kana were once again amazed by the beauty of the sea. Three women were enjoying the cool water and splashing around. Rin explained to El that the sea was the only place in the entire territory that they could boast about. Al looked at one of the barrels of seafood. He asked Rin if the sea in this place was always so clear and deep, and if there was supposed to be a lot of seafood. Rin was a little surprised by El's question, but confirmed his assumption. She also looked at the barrel full of seaweed and explained to El that they had so much seafood that they couldn't eat it all, so they stored it in barrels like these, and besides, they hadn't found a good way to export it. As always, El asked Rin directly what she thought about selling him all of her surplus seafood. Rin would be a little surprised at what El would do with all the seafood, and would ask him if he was serious and what he was going to do with it. He explained to her that she had more seafood than he wanted, and that she would not have to worry about transportation costs or logistics, and asked her to accept his offer, smiling. In this world, potions are mainly used to enhance one's own body's energy and use the body's regenerative power to heal wounds. For example, the main ingredient of such a regeneration potion is manticore blood. To use this blood, the temple uses a special purification method to cleanse it and make it suitable for production. However, unfortunately, there are too few potions in the kingdoms, not even close to the amount needed to heal all the wounded. Accordingly, the priest was surprised when Dibel informed one of the temple knights in the Dej Kingdom's rear church that he had a whopping 300,000 bottles of the much sought-after manticore blood. When the priest heard Dibel's statement, no matter how unbelieving he was, he wanted to hear it again and asked for confirmation. He also asked Priest V how much of the amount he could take, and V thought for a moment and then said that his church, being powerful in holy magic, could use a maximum of 10,000 to 30,000 bottles of this blood. Then Dibel sighed. He didn't expect the church to need so little, and also stated that he expected it to be around 100,000 bottles. This in turn surprised the priest, and he had to react quickly, and he thought that the quantity of 100,000 bottles, although extremely large, could be provided. Dibble cleverly tried to cement the priest's decision by expressing surprise and asking if it was really okay for him to order so much. In order to further play his role as a merchant, Dibble began to explain that this blood would also be in high demand in other churches on the continent, offering a price of 300,000 gold coins without a discount. Without long negotiations, the priest accepted Dibble's extremely advantageous offer and thanked him. However, Vi could not hide his curiosity and eventually asked who would provide such valuable material in such quantity. Smiling, Dibble stated that the man in question was, simply put, the greatest genius of his time. Thinking about Al stood at the top of his magical tower, looking down at the city that had grown up around it. As his gaze wandered around the city, he couldn't believe that this area was the infamous Manticore Gorge. He looked at the small warehouse next to his magic tower. There, workers were currently transporting crates of valuable Manticore blood, ensuring the stability of the city's income. He remembered how after taking over the estate, she had transported them into his interdimensional space using his magic. He fed them seafood that he got from his cousin. Although initially some of the lesser Manticores objected to the villagers taking their blood. Al solved this problem with the help of a new pet in the form of the Manticore King. Soon, a real symbiosis arose between the Manticore and the villagers. Due to the Manticore's special and unique regenerative ability, they quickly regenerated their own blood, creating a continuous cycle. Through this cycle and symbiosis, a true friendship was born. It also created an opportunity for the village to make huge profits. While Elle still stood on top of her tower, he reflected on the fact that few people knew about the magical tower that was now present in Manticore Gorge. Since the transportation of goods took place through a teleportation portal, even on the nearby roads there were no signs of transporting a particularly large amount of resources to create such a tower. However, there were rumors from time to time that a new magical tower was being formed that would rival the other magical towers in most cities. However, Al knew that he had to act very carefully so as not to jeopardize the peace he had established. Standing thoughtfully on his tower, he heard someone urgently running into his room. Reacting quickly, he teleported back to his room through a small portal. As soon as he arrived, Kana burst through the door, loudly shouting his brother's name. Kana looked genuinely worried and agitated, and Elle wanted to know what was going on. So he asked his sister what was new and why she was in such a hurry. With tears in her eyes, Kana cried and said that something was wrong with her sister. A cold shiver ran down Al's spine and he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Together with Kana, he ran down the corridor. He opened the door to Serena's room and called her name. When they entered the room, Serena was lying in her bed, and their mother was already sitting by the bed, taking care of her daughter. Serena had a high body temperature, was sweating, and could barely breathe. Al immediately asked his mother if she was sick and what was wrong with her. His mother replied that she had no idea what had happened and begged her son to use magic to find out what was happening to his sister. Aware of his mother's serious expression and Serena's labored breathing, Al touched her wrist and tried to use his magic to understand what was going on inside her. He was surprised and his eyes widened when he realized that the mana inside her body was slowly dissipating. He also realized that something else was beginning to develop inside her. At first, he couldn't determine whether it was a dark aura like a demon's or a holy aura from the heavens. After some time, he explained to his mother and Kani that if he was right, the new power in Serena's body was holy power. He also said that they made a mistake, and now the entire continent will be after his sister. Al and Kane's mother couldn't believe what Al had just discovered. Moreover, Al stated that they should not waste time, since some people might already know about this event. He quickly entrusted his sister Kana to take care of Serena, to which she immediately agreed. He then explained to his family that he needed to immediately create a barrier around the village. His mother asked if it was necessary to do it right away. Al confirmed, assuring them not to worry and that he would be away for a while. After that, he disappeared through the portal, leaving his family alone in Serena's room. As he returned to the magic tower, wondering how long it would take to erect a barrier around the entire city, he realized that it didn't matter if it took a little longer. He had to make sure he did it right. There was a determination in Al's eyes that signaled that he had to protect his sister at any cost. He immediately raised his hand, releasing his magic, and a magic circle instantly appeared beneath him, swirling around him as if dancing. A large beam of magic shot into the sky, splitting at the top to form a barrier. Magic cascaded across the city like a giant glass dome. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Gaia, in the Vatican, the High Priest announced that the day they had been waiting for had arrived, an expectation that began 300 years ago when they first received the prophecy. Next to the senior priests, the young disciple knelt impatiently, listening to the words of his teacher. Together they looked at the large, brightly glowing source of mana that had given them the prophecy of darkness. Mana's source reported that it was a time to be joyful, but also frightening, and that the world was awash in a constant stream of change. Moreover, the elder and younger priests marveled at the continuation of the prophecy, revealing that there was a place that had never been understood, and that there would appear beauty, bright as light, and fill every dark place with light. The senior priest asked his younger colleague Artmos if he understood the prophecy, and the junior priest explained that the prophecy could mean the Leviton Plateau, where the souls of darkness exist. He went on to explain that the mention of a flow could be related to magic. His teacher found his interpretation ideal and praised his student for it. He subsequently tasked them with announcing the saint's revelation and announcing that a new saint would appear on their continent, and they were ordered to cooperate with the Talon Kingdom and its knights. Meanwhile, Serena was visibly suffering. Her body temperature was rising, and her breathing was becoming increasingly difficult. Kani had tears in her eyes as she looked at her sister suffering from so much pain, hoping that she would overcome it all. On the contrary, Elle's mother prayed for her daughter to survive. Al continued with his plan to build a barrier to protect his sister. As a good, loving mother would do, Al's mother stroked the strands of hair from her daughter's face, touching her cheek. She hoped that she would feel better soon, looking forward to the time when they could have fun together again. Al, who had returned to the room by this point, explained to his family that in the meantime, the mana in Serena's body was slowly but surely being replaced by holy power. He also reminded them that, unlike other normal mages and knights, Serena had a huge amount of mana in her body. Because of such a huge amount of mana, an equally huge amount of holy power had to be channeled into her. And this amount was the cause of the intense pain she was currently experiencing, and also stated that they could not stop this process, and there was nothing they could do to prevent Serena from becoming a saint. He knew that the Holy Kingdom would inform everyone about the birth of a new saint, and it was only a matter of time before Serena was found. Kana knew that this Holy Kingdom, which worshipped the gods, would spare no effort to take her sister under its wing. Mother Ela also knew that a saint has no freedom, and that it doesn't matter in principle whether she is a saint or in hell. She absolutely did not want such a fate for her daughter, and will do everything in her power to ensure that her beloved daughter does not lead such an unhappy life. When Kana felt her mother's loving thoughts, she made the decision to do everything she could to protect her precious sister. El wanted to do everything to save his beloved family member from such a fate. He assured his mothers and sister that they would be able to protect Serena. Suddenly, a soft sound filled the room, approaching Al and turning into a magic letter. Looking at the letter, Al realized that it seemed to have come from the royal palace. Curious, Al's mother asked what the royal palace wanted and if anything special had happened. While reading the letter, El explained to his mother that the royal palace wanted him to attend the royal conference. His skeptical mother asked why he, of all people, should attend the royal conference. El replied that he had no idea. His only guess was that they might want him to officially announce that he had built a new magic tower and that he would announce his alliance with the third prince to strengthen the Essen faction. However, Al also knew that the magic towers had traditionally maintained a neutral stance towards the kingdom, and this invitation would potentially not change his plans in any way. Concerned and sad, Al's mother looked at him and asked again what he was planning. Somewhat smug, he looked down and set off, telling his mother and sisters that he would be back soon, but for now they should take care of Serena. In conclusion, Al's mother wished him a safe journey and asked him to return in peace. Al headed to Rena's house. Al immediately realized that Rena's territory had become much more stable than it had been a few days ago. Rin said that such a stable territory was only possible because El helped her, and thanked him again. However, she was curious as to why Al had visited her today, as she couldn't believe that he would just walk around her territory, to which Al asked her if he was that easy to read. Al wanted to be frank once again, and asked Rin if she wanted them to attend the royal conference together to bring the Luce family closer to world politics. This news surprised Rin, who asked if she had understood El correctly. El said that he believed that with her skills and the support of the magic tower, she would be able to restore the Luce family to an important and influential noble status. He suggested that their financial difficulties could be eased by exporting seafood. Furthermore, El explained to Rin that she was still known as a sword expert at such a young age, and that she had a group of knights following her. Rin caught El's words and thought for a moment, but she doubted that even if her family continued to grow steadily, they still wouldn't be able to compare to other families. El asked her if she could be referring to the Tyndall family, to which Rin widened her eyes and asked why he specifically mentioned that family for comparison. El explained that it was a well-known story, and he had heard that the second son of that family was persistently proposing to her. Moreover, they took advantage of the fact that Luce's family had recently been attacked by monsters to continue pressuring them to accept the marriage proposal. Rin had to pull herself together and lightly clenched her hands, and she knew that the Tendel family was an arrogant and shameless family. But she also knew that this family had a higher status than hers and took advantage of that fact. Ashamed of her situation, she looked at her hands. Elle said that it was time for her to assert her family's true strength and speak out against this unfair treatment. And he also felt that Rin wanted to take her chance to change and no longer passively watch her family continue to lose honor, but to slowly restore that honor. To confirm this and continue to encourage her, Al mentioned that he was a 7th-level mage and had recently acquired a magic tower. Rin looked at Al meekly and asked why he was so warm and kind to her. She then screamed loudly, wondering if it could be because he had some ulterior motive. Al denied this and explained that they were related and that she should stop looking at him sexually. She admitted that she had misunderstood and apologized for her behavior. Elle, however, understood that due to the many difficult situations Rin had been through, it was difficult for her to accept goodwill and believe in the innocence of people. After this, Elle left and said goodbye to Rin, reminding her that he would take her to the conference via teleportation. Elle teased her a little, joking that she actually thought he wanted something sexual from her. Rin apologized again. Meanwhile, an important meeting was taking place in the castle. The table was hit hard with a fist. An elderly man with a funny beard and thinning hair asked the conference participants what they were going to do since the second prince's faction was in danger. He also explained that the plan to weaken the first prince's faction had failed, and the third prince's faction had even gained more power.